Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María y estoy aquí por los servicios de intérprete en español.
Thank you. So I want to remind the public, just to reiterate what happened right before we broke for lunch. We are sharing that now is the time to make public comment on this particular budget. This will be the opportunity that you have in order to voice your concerns, advocacy, or self-driven priorities that you want us to consider as part of this budget-making process. You'll be given 2 minutes to share your comments with this board as we go through this. And now is that time. There will not be another time before the end of these budget hearings to make a public comment on the format of the agenda or the priorities within it. So now is the time for public comment. I know that we might have quite a bit, and it is a big agenda packet. And to reiterate what we've done at the beginning of this agenda, we did move the consent portion of the budget to the back side of the budget. So we have not approved the consent portions of the agenda. All those are still being considered. So we welcome the public now. And I am going to start with folks in chambers. So if you'd like to make a public comment regarding this budget, I ask that you now step forward. Have I done a roll call? I think I forgot the roll call. So as we reconvene, I'm going to ask the clerk to take a roll call of the members of the Board of Supervisors.
Let the record reflect all supervisors are present, with Supervisor Parker, Alejo, Phillips, and Adams appearing via video conference, and Chair Supervisor Lopez appearing in person.
Thank you so much. So now at this point, we are open for public comments on this budget. If you're in room and wish to make a comment, please step forward. If you're participating via Zoom, we ask that you use the raise hand function. That's at the bottom of the participants tab, and we will go with in-room public comment first and then go to the Zoom. So please identify yourself for the record and share your public comment with us now. You'll each have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dorian Manuel. I'm the current case manager for the Monterey County Safe Parking Program, which may be losing funding today. As we've always said, a lot of the problem with folks failing to empathize with the homeless is a realization that most people are simply one big disaster away from falling into that situation themselves. And recently, millions of Americans simultaneously got hit with that same disaster all at once. We've had a huge influx of calls and cries out for services. Just much larger than anything I've seen before in my 2 years in this position. We run a very small program, all things considered. We run on a small budget. We have 2 staff members on pay. But during my time in this position, I have seen the very real effect it could have on people's lives. Just over the last fiscal year, we've had 12 successfully housed cases of our guests, which is more than 12 people who have been housed after living in their vehicle for different amounts of times, with multiple guests also gaining employment through the help of the program. At one point, 100% of our guests were either working or collecting disability benefits if they were unfit for work. And as some people cycled into housing and out of the program, we brought in more people, so we're still very high in that percentage, but not quite at 100 currently. I'm a firm believer that we have more to gain from helping people than they do from being helped. And the amount of love and empathy and resilience that I have seen from the guests that we have been assisting in my time in this position has been outstanding. It is a constant reminder that community is a verb, not a noun. It is us helping each other. And
thank you, Dorian. We appreciate your public comment. I will ask our next speakers
they're always supporting us. I appreciate it.
To speak a little closer to the microphone. We're having some hearing issues with folks on the other end of the Zoom, so the louder the better. We appreciate you again, and please identify yourself for the record. You have 2 minutes to share your comment.
Okay, my name is Hope Tadima. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I was in the program that Dorian just spoke about. I worked in an industry for 18 and a half years that simply went away. And I think in the county, based on the numbers we saw, we've got high unemployment and industries are disparately impacted. So it's similar to my situation. I couldn't find a new employer. I had to find a new industry. And I was in entry level everywhere I went, but I wasn't young. Had 5 degrees that didn't apply. And so you get caught between a rock and a hard place. I entered and lived in the program for 6 months in my car, and every night I went to EDD training to train for a new career. And I don't think that would be possible if I didn't have a car to sleep in. I don't understand how I personally could sleep on the ground and go to job interviews or sleep on the ground and undergo training. After leaving training, I taught at-risk high school students and tutored autistic college students, and I now work for Orphan Productions myself. So I see the 20% unemployment rate that we're currently facing could conceivably become quite stubborn as people simply drop out and don't have a place to live, to apply for work or retrain. And so it's a really important program. I hope that the county will look at how to keep people with 20 years experience from falling through the cracks permanently and ending their employment history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hope.
Chair Lopez, members of the Board of Supervisors, I'm Robin McCrae, and I'm the CEO of Community Human Services. I'm here with our partners from Gathering for Women to talk to you today and request your support of augmentation of $100,000 for the Peninsula Shelter that's under construction right now, Casa de Noche Buena. Casa de Noche Buena will be the only low-barrier shelter on the peninsula serving single women and families with children, with the overarching goal of providing women and families with a bridge from homelessness to housing. An investment in the shelter and wraparound services now will greatly improve the odds that our homeless community members will no longer need to rely on social services and other public assistance in the future. Homelessness was a challenge before COVID-19, but now with the pandemic, it's even more imperative that a shelter be built on the peninsula to mirror the one that's being built in Salinas. We greatly appreciate the county's partnership in leasing us a facility for the shelter at no cost, and we are now in the process of improving the county's asset for use as the shelter. Community Human Services and Gathering for Women are acutely aware of the financial challenges facing the county, our municipalities, especially those on the peninsula from whom we are also seeking support, and the rest of the community. We too will be fiscally challenged in the months and the years to come, but we remain committed to establishing and operating a replicable homeless shelter on the Monterey Peninsula and urge you to continue supporting our efforts, and your ongoing partnership in this effort will be key to our success. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCrae.
Good afternoon, Chair Lopez, Board of Supervisors. My name is Stacey Alziebler Perkins, and I'm the Executive Director of Gathering for Women Monterey. Here with my partners, Community Human Services, we're here to ask you to please support the augmentation request for the Seaside Center, Casa de Noche Buena. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a woman or a family with children living on the streets right now. I know it was mentioned earlier that the budget is a perfect opportunity to make change in the community, and I hope you will support our augmentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for hearing us out. I'm Roxanne Wilson, and I'm the Executive Officer of the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers, Monterey and San Benito County's Continuum of Care Coordinating Agency, and the largest local membership of nonprofits missioned with addressing the complex issues surrounding homelessness. We have been a partner with the county for decades. The coalition has been busy. We currently administer approximately $15 million of state funding, of which 2 shelters are being built, as mentioned earlier. And we also are supporting youth outreach and rental assistance. We are in the process of working in collaboration with the City of Salinas, the County of San Benito, and various departments within the County of Monterey to completely rewrite the 10-year plan to end homelessness. This is a plan that is not intended to sit on the shelf, but intended to be put into action. This is a plan that will address South County, the Peninsula, Pajaro, and the City of Salinas separately. In addition, the coalition scored 7 less than the highest-ranking COC in the nation during the last Continuum of Care collaborative application. We have also reevaluated our coordinated entry system, subsequently leading to the overhaul we are currently working on, which will further streamline highly vulnerable homeless individuals and families into housing. All these things we could not do without the support of the county. As we enter into what may be the largest recession most of us will experience in our lifetime, I humbly ask the board to consider fully funding the coalition and our members as indicated on the augmentations. Now is the time to ramp up and prepare for the wave of people at risk of losing their homes while continuing to work on those who have already lost everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Anybody else in chambers?
Good afternoon, Chair Lopez, supervisors, and the public in attendance. My name is Jill Allen. I'm the Executive Director of Dorothy's Place in Salinas. I'm going to read from my notes. I'm speaking on behalf of the Chinatown Drop-In Center, which you'll find on page 524 and 528 of your budget. I find that I often need to remind the public that Dorothy's Place is more than a soup kitchen. We also assist hundreds of chronically unsheltered people from encampment life into permanent housing. Until now, services for the homeless have been an unfunded mandate. As we contrast the homeless services of pre-COVID times with our current COVID-affected future, we see many more people becoming homeless, and we see a definite move towards state and federal entities pushing local governments to house unsheltered people. They expect us to get it done with the resources we already have present. We have every reason to expect this rationale will continue and that our continued state and HUD funding will be threatened if we don't succeed. In the past 6 months alone, 19 chronically unsheltered persons were assisted into housing by Dorothy's Place social workers, and we didn't stop in March. 5 have been housed since the advent of the COVID crisis without additional resources. Any reduction in funding for the Chinatown Drop-In Center would mean laying off the social work staff in favor of retaining the community health workers that maintain basic needs services only. This reduces our efficacy of permanent housing assistance to 0. Laying off the social workers puts an end to years of trust built in our community that has resulted in getting hundreds of chronically unsheltered people housed since our contract started in 2015. Our partnerships and collaboration with other service providers make us strong, but the true talent of these social workers is in understanding their clients' issues and assisting them past their barriers while tolerating mental health issues and addiction. This talent is unique to Dorothy's Place.
Thank you,
Ms.
Ms. Allen.
Our mission is to serve.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
Good afternoon, Chair Lopez, members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Amy Stoker. For 2 years, I've served as Finance Director at Gathering for Women. We appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today and request your support of augmentation to reinstate funding to Gathering for Women for the Community Action Plan in the amount of $40,000. In fact, we would be remiss if we did not provide a voice for the over 400 homeless women who receive services through that program. For many, our day center is the only shelter, and even if it's only for a few hours, it's a place to feel safe. They can shower, get a hot meal, clean clothes, but most importantly, they have access to our case management program, where they have someone who can help them navigate the system out of their current situation and into permanent housing. This program is funded in part through our partnership with the county and also leverages other funds through foundations, cities, and private donations. We understand that you are faced with some heartbreaking decisions caused by COVID-19. But if anything, the current crisis has put a spotlight on those in the community who have no place to shelter and are the most vulnerable. We hope that you will find a way to continue to support Gathering for Women through the CAP program and the fine work that it does. And we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Stoker. Anybody else in chambers? Seeing nobody coming forward, I'm going to go to the Zoom, and I did get a request from Jackie Cruz from the Salinas Valley Promise as part of her comments to combine time for several speakers. So if those speakers would do me the favor of lowering their hands, and if we could recognize Ms. Cruz, we're going to give them 8 minutes to share their public comment in the form of a presentation. Okay, Ms. Cruz, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you so much. I've done that, Chairman Lopez, and as well, I would like to be able to share the presentation at this time.
Can you allow her to share screen? Or do you want to load the presentation and click through when she asks, Julian? Julian's going to load your presentation and he'll click through as you request.
Okay, great. We can do that too. That'd probably be easier. Okay, I'm allowed to share.
Okay, you've got
Thank
it.
you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors, county staff leadership, and members of the public present today via Zoom and in the chambers. On behalf of all of us at Hartnell College, the Salinas Valley Promise Program Committee, and the hundreds and potentially thousands of students incoming into the Promise Program, we thank you for your courageous leadership that you took last year, fiscal year 1920, to be able to provide the seed funding to launch this very innovative partnership in this program that is truly changing the lives of many and thousands of youth. We are committed to the progress of Monterey County in creating a strong workforce that can fill the middle and high wage jobs of today and tomorrow, and certainly of helping jumpstart back the economy after the pandemic. This is why Hartnell College is committing to accountability metrics that track employment, increase in wage earnings, and job placement in career technical areas of growth and high industry demand. The Salinas Valley Promise Program includes over 30 cohorts of future early childhood care providers, K-12 teachers, administration of justice professionals, respiratory care practitioners, nurses, computer scientists, EMT, public health professionals, mechanics, welders, ag technicians, business owners, and business support staff as well. Ultimately, our future taxpayers. If I'm gonna ask if you could please forward the slides, or here I am. Okay, I'm not gonna go through the requirements just for the benefit of time, but this is the comprehensive model. It is a social cohort model that has included in it pre-college design, very intentional approach to begin with the earlier grades with NASA academies and a very basic skill now, which is coding. And we are there with 4,000 children from K through 6. And in the high schools now, we're happy to report that we have approximately 1,000 students taking early college credit, earning college and high school credit in all comprehensive high schools and including the private schools here in the Salinas Valley. And so the Salinas Valley Promise Program is the next step in their progression toward a self-sufficiency and economic vitality as individuals. Go ahead. So I wanted to report to you of the investment and the powerful investment you made last year of some of the preliminary program outcomes. And so here we have 14% increase in local high school enrollment. And better than that is 37% increase in the amount of students that are taking full-time units, which is huge because that really is a huge indicator for student success. Our biggest growth actually was North Monterey County High School, who went from 10 full-time students to 51 full-time students. And overall, we believe this is a great indication that the program in 1 year only has already shown great progress. So we can't wait to see what else we can do. Here's another data point that we wanted to share with you. We did an analysis of variance, and we were able to see that Salinas Valley Promise Program students are succeeding in their coursework more than full-time, first-time students that are not in the Salinas Valley Promise Program. And even Furthermore, if we look at the regular student population, not the full-time student population, that rate is 45% success. So Salinas Valley Promise students are succeeding at a far higher rate than any of our other cohorts that we compare to. And then more good news is our Salinas Valley Promise participants are completing 4.3 courses in average versus a non-Salinas Valley program participants that are also first time in college. And then you could see the 2.4 average course completion, and that is for overall Hartnell students. And the projections for the Salinas Valley Promise 2020, we've had over 2,200 intent forms or applications for the promise. This would nearly quadruple the participants. We don't know if due to COVID, we will see some drop off, but we do feel that our projections would be conservative to at least say that we will reach 1,000 students for this next year. And you could see here the breakdown from the cities and the communities where the applicants are coming from. So we're very encouraged and very happy with this news. Another point of comment that I wanted to make, and this was all thanks to you guys, that the Bright Futures and the Children's Council for Monterey County recognize the work of the Salinas Valley Promise. And once again, this is collective work. This is a partnership, and it takes many, many people to make this happen. And having the match from the county was huge in that. And I want to just to finalize my comments, I wanted to share the funding and the budget projections for this. I wanted to mention to you that after the match came in from the county, the city of Gonzales, the city of Soledad, the city of Greenfield, and the city of King contributed to the promise. And so I think they are also going to be facing those budget, the budget limitations that we're all facing. But I'm encouraged that they have expressed their interest to continue to support, which is a great indication that they're also seeing the benefits to their community and their residents. So thank you for being that example and for taking that big step forward in supporting something that really speaks to self-sufficiency, economic development, and prevention of poverty, truly. Thank you for that. So this is our projection. While the overall cost of the program is gonna go up, we feel that with our collective efforts, we can actually make this happen for the students that will come in for this next year. And so again, I want to just share with you one last comment. I am very encouraged. I was able to listen into all the presentations, encouraged with the leadership of our Monterey County Board of Supervisors and the staff there with the comments related to the social tragedies, as well as the pandemic, and as well as the progressive investments to economic development, as well as my colleagues that were there presenting on the Gathering for Women and the homelessness support to Dorothy's and all of the different groups that are working together on this. Thank you for your consideration again of including us in the augmentation. And I think this is a great investment. And we're gonna work very, very hard to support these students to find themselves out of poverty and into tax-paying individuals that can help our community be stronger and better. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. We appreciate your comments. I'm going to keep going with the Zoom. My next speaker is Alan Hoffa. Mr. Hoffa will now give you the ability to unmute yourself. If you would go ahead and share your 2-minute comment with us.
Hi, Chair Lopez, thank you so much, and Board of Supervisors, I appreciate your time. Alan Hoffa, City of Monterey Council member, and I'm speaking to you today as a board member representing the city on the Community Human Services Board. All of the presentations you've heard from today are very important programs and worthy of your support. I speak today in particular for the augmentation for the Seaside Noche Buena shelter for women and families. We are your partner in this project. This first year is especially critical to make sure that the program gets off on a strong footing. We've done the hard work of building public support, gaining the city council's support. We're renovating your building, improving a county asset. and hope to begin services in November. We want to do our part to help address community needs and homelessness on the peninsula. Everyone in our community needs to be part of that solution. It's since 2012, I've been working very hard to try to get a shelter on the peninsula so that the peninsula is doing its part to provide that needed shelter. Our cities are going to be part of the solution. I will be advocating for our city to support this. Some of the money will come from the state, and we really desperately need your support also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffa. Next, we're going to go to Craig Kaufman. Mr. Kaufman, you'll now be given the ability to unmute yourself. You'll be given 2 minutes to share your comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Lopez and Board of Supervisors. I'm speaking to you from the historic Southern Pacific Freight Building. It's actually the oldest surviving commercial building in Salinas. It's also going to be the future home of the California Welcome Center. We plan on opening our doors at the end of this month. And I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you the stories that I've uncovered about this building. And you know, we're a state that's only 170 years old, but yet we're the 5th largest economy in the world with the most population anywhere else in the country. And with that, really demonstrates sort of the resiliency and the boldness of Californians, and especially here on the Central Coast, that made this place what it is today. I've been at this now for about 12 years. I'm the founder and the executive director of the Salinas Valley Tourism and Visitors Bureau. And I started the program because I really felt that the Salinas and Salinas Valley has a lot to offer as far as it relates to tourism. Our 2 biggest industries in this county is tourism and agriculture. And my question is, why aren't we doing agritourism? I know that there's a lot of pitfalls with that and a lot of challenges with that. But if I may, I'm holding up a piece that was done actually by the Board of Supervisors back in 1944. And this was a piece that really advertised what Monterey County was all about. And a lot of it had to do with agriculture and our natural resources. We have a national park and a national park trail within our county. And I just think that there's a greater opportunity for us to increase TOT, find other TOT revenue streams that could be done in our county parks and throughout the Salinas Valley that would complement the peninsula. And so I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Next, we'll go to, there's a phone number that ends in 004. So if your phone number ends in 004, you'll now be given the ability to unmute yourself and share your public comment for 2 minutes. Please identify yourself for the record. Thank you. Double 04. Okay, we're having an issue with 004 audio, so we're going to go ahead and move on. We will come back to you. We're going to go to Kate Daniels next. Ms. Daniels, we're going to go ahead and let you unmute yourself and give you 2 minutes to share your comment with this board.
Thank you, Chair Lopez and members of the Board of Supervisors. I appreciate this opportunity to make public comment. I am a member of the Gathering for Women Board of Directors. And like my colleagues who have spoken before, this is to public comment to respectfully request that you support the augmentation request for the seaside shelter Casa de Noche Buena. I speak on behalf of the women who have had intimate experience as both the interim executive director and a board member who cannot afford the high cost of housing in Monterey County. This is not a crisis that they or families with children in need of our services created. And until we resolve the housing crisis we face, it is really critical that we provide services such as Casa de Noche Buena to help these families and these women move from homelessness to secure housing. Our two organizations, both the Gathering for Women and Community Human Services, have what I believe are unmatched skills in this county to provide shelter and comprehensive case management to move women and families on the losing end of the housing crisis into safe and secure permanent housing. I have seen our case managers firsthand successfully move guests of our programs out of homelessness. The ability to expand this opportunity to more women and families with children is too important to lose, but unfortunately, we cannot do this without your support. So again, I respectfully ask you to please support the augmentation request for the Seaside Shelter, Casa de Noche Buena. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. We appreciate your public comment. Next, we're going to go to Diana Jimenez. Ms. Jimenez, you'll now be given the opportunity to unmute yourself and share your 2-minute comment with this board.
Thank you, Chair Lopez and members of the board. As the mother of 3 young Latino young men, and the aunt of a niece and nephew who are half African American and half Latino, I sincerely want to thank you for all of your comments this morning. I was sincerely moved by them, and I'm inspired by them through your leadership. I'm hopeful that this too will pass and that we will together move on to greater things. The main reason, one of the reasons I'm now speaking is to advocate for the support of the augmentation of the adult protective social worker positions. The senior population continues to grow in Monterey County like it is statewide and nationwide. And we have compared to the general population, we have 1 in 5 individuals who are seniors over the age of 60. This trend is expected to continue along with the number of adults living past 85. Sadly, the number of adults with Alzheimer's, disabilities, and homelessness also continues to increase. Also, sadly, the number of adult protective services reports continues to increase. Here in Monterey County, we received 5 times the numbers of APS referrals in 2019 compared to 2010. During the most recent calendar year, we received 2,100 reports of alleged abuse and neglect, which represents a 29% increase from last year. The Department of Social Services has struggled to keep up with the growth of our vulnerable senior population, and without adequate resources, it will be increasingly difficult to meet the state mandates for investigating allegations of elder and dependent adult abuse and neglect. Again, please consider and support the augmentation of the adult protective social worker positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez. We appreciate your public comment. Next, we're going to go to Becky Pimentel. We're going to go ahead and unmute your microphone and give you 2 minutes to share your public comment with this board.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to also thank our board for and our chair for sharing their feelings about the recent events. It really gives us courage and hope to partake in a better today. My name is Becky Pimentel, as I said, and I am a county employee, and I have been for 12 years. I've worked as a child welfare worker and supervisor for 11 of those years, and currently I am a supervisor with Adult Protective Services. We are a small but very mighty group of social workers. Over the last 10 years, the workload has increased dramatically. And as Ms. Jimenez had mentioned, from 2010 to 2019, the amount of APS reports has increased by a staggering 444%. I had to read that twice, a staggering 444%. In 2019, the amount of reports received was 5 times the number of reports received in 2010. And in the most recent calendar year, that was, we received 2,100 reports of alleged abuse and neglect. And this is an ongoing trend that we've had for at least 3 years, where 29% increase every year. This trend has been consistent over the last 3 years, like I said, and so we are feeling the growth of this department and the number of reports. What also continues to grow is the senior population, and they are growing at a higher rate than the general population, with 1 in 5 residents aged 60 or over. And this trend, again, is expected to continue as people are living longer. Naturally, this growth is reflected in the numbers. With this increased workload, it is imperative that our staff grow to keep up with the increase of the demands of the population. Additional social work staff is required to meet these mandates to serve and protect the most vulnerable population. The department's ability to meet the state mandate and investigating allegations of elder and dependent adults can be compromised if we don't have additional social work staff. As I mentioned earlier, I have been a social worker and social work supervisor for this county for over 12 years. I say that with great pride. And as an employee of this county, I have felt that our board has acknowledged the importance of our work and has supported our department. This support has enabled us to continue to do the work that we do, which is serving the most vulnerable populations of this county. I hope that today you are moved to continue to support our department in approving the additional positions of social work staff that will allow us to keep up with the demands and the growth and the needs of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pimentel. We appreciate your comment. We're going to go to Marquise Davis next. We're going to go ahead and unmute your microphone and give you 2 minutes to share your comment with this board.
Hello, Board of Supervisors. My name is Marquise Davis. I'm the Learning and Development Manager of the YWCA Monterey County. The mission of the YWCA is to eliminate racism and empower women. And though the YWCA Monterey County does not directly contribute to strides in early learning education, we have many stakes in its continued improvement. We primarily serve clients who have experienced domestic violence and human trafficking. Our clients often have young children who consequently also experience violent incidents in the home indirectly. Because the early years of life involve both critical and sensitive periods of development, traumatic events such as experiencing violence and abuse or witnessing violence in the home, referred to as adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, can have lasting impacts well into adulthood, including chronic health problems, mental illness, and substance misuse in adulthood, which is possibly why this issue has become such a hot-button topic in trauma-informed practices. A large portion of our clients also experience the chronic conditions of poverty and cultural exclusion, which ultimately can negatively impact how the child is experiencing the world around him and learning to navigate within it. Our clients are directly affected by the services that are and are not available for young children, including affordable childcare options, services to young children and families experiencing trauma, etc. And those who are providing any type of services to young children should have adequate knowledge of how trauma manifests in young children, as well as the appropriate methods of intervention, because the experiences during the earliest years of a person's life not only lay the foundation for future learning, but have a direct correlation with overall success and quality of life. It is imperative that funds continue to be directed towards early learning to provide more high quality services to young children, a demographic that is both one of the most vulnerable and totally dependent upon its environment to thrive. We as individuals and within the context of our respective social entities should all champion investments that contribute to building a bright future by ensuring each child has a bright beginning. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. We appreciate your comments. We're going to go to Margarita Mendoza Flores next. We're going to go ahead and give you the ability to unmute yourself so you can share your 2-minute comment with this board.
Good afternoon. Not only has the number of cases increased significantly for adult protective services, so has the complexity of the new challenges we face as a society. To state the obvious, during these unprecedented times, we face a common threat of COVID-19. Now more than ever, our vulnerable members of our community, our elders and dependent adults, require our support and advocacy. Today, I'd like to be a voice for those members of our community. As an essential worker, an adult protective services worker, you should know that we have been continuing our efforts to ensure the safety and well-being of our seniors and dependent adults. I cannot emphasize the time and collaborative effort it takes to support and ensure the welfare of our vulnerable members of the community. Thanks to the collaborative effort I've had with other agencies, from first responders to behavioral health, hospitals, ombudsmen, and family members, some of the most vulnerable members in our community are safe and better off than they were prior to our intervention. During one of our COVID-19 wellness calls, I learned that because of the APS intervention done prior to the shelter-in-place order, An elderly man in his 90s with very limited support when I first met him is now able to remain safe at home, even during this ongoing pandemic. He expresses gratitude for our service. He was so grateful to have APS help, help him establish a network of caring people to assist him with his activities of daily living. That support network continues to be available to him today. These cases are known as self-neglect cases. Sometimes they're harder for others to understand when there is no perpetrator. Instead, it occurs when an individual is threatening their own welfare. Cases like these take so much more time and effort because we have limited support and resources we must work with. It takes a lot of research and effort to gather these resources for our clients and our families. Generally, clients in this predicament lack a good support system.
Ms. Mendoza-Flores, we're over 2 minutes. I'm wondering if you don't mind wrapping up your comments for us.
Elders and disabled adults in our community deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. More support to add another essential worker, an APS social worker, will help ensure a strong safety net. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. We're going to go to Rob Rapp next. Mr. Rapp, you will go ahead and unmute your microphone and give you the ability to share your 2-minute comment with us now.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Lopez, or good afternoon, Chair Lopez and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Rob Rapp, and I've been the Development Director at Community Human Services for 10 years. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I respectfully request that you support our Safe Place program for homeless youth. Specifically, we're asking that you not cut $10,000 of our 2020 CAP contract and $10,000 of our 2021 CAP contract. Safe Place is the only homeless youth program specific on Monterey Peninsula. It provides homeless youth an anchor of essential services, including individual, group, and family counseling, family reunification, and alternate living arrangements, survival aids such as food, clothing, hygiene products, first aid, referrals to other community resources, classes on sexual behavior and drug and alcohol use, and temporary emergency shelter. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, homelessness was identified as one of the major social challenges confronting Monterey County. With homeless individuals being at greater risk of contracting and spreading the coronavirus, the challenge is even more pronounced, making the need for a safe place more important than ever. Safe Place provides short-term supportive services to youth experiencing homelessness and long-term solutions for our community. I agree with the sentiments expressed by the supervisors. We do need to stand up for our most vulnerable. We do need to stand up for unaccompanied homeless youth. We need to be the caring adults in their lives. Please support our Safe Place program. Thank you all for your longtime support.
Thank you, Mr. Rapp. We're going to go ahead and go to our next commenter, whose last three are 279. We're going to go ahead and give you the ability to unmute yourself so you can share your 2-minute comment with this board.
Thank you, Chair, board members. This is Matt Huerta speaking to you today as the program manager for the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership Housing Initiative. And again, thank you for your heartfelt comments earlier regarding the state of affairs that we have in our country and our community. And I hope that we can begin to heal as soon as possible. I think part of that, as mentioned earlier, has directly to do with your investments that we make here in the community. And as part of Monterey Bay Economic Partnership's housing initiative, we pivoted very quickly when we realized that the COVID pandemic and health emergency response was going to have a huge impact on our housing conditions that we all know we're way behind in meeting our production goals as a county, as a community, and that we suffer overcrowding and several other conditions that lead to very poor health outcomes already that now have been exacerbated. So we join others in pushing for emergency relief, but also looking to the long-term needs of more permanent housing opportunities for farm workers, seniors, and others. And so we want to work with the county staff to potentially apply for and work with you or the City of Salinas to apply directly to the Local Housing Trust Fund program at the state that would potentially allow for a 1-to-1 match for dollars that we're able to raise locally, and that we obviously appreciate the partnership that we've had with the county and we want to continue our short-term financing program that we have provided some loans here in Monterey County, some others, many more loans in Santa Cruz County, with over 415 homes supported and over $7 million invested so far. The opportunity, though, is to apply for this state award, and the application is due in early August. I think it's the 3rd. And again, it's part of the Prop 1 resources that were approved by voters, and over $4 billion was approved in 2018. And one line item in there is this $300 million line item that is the Local Housing Trust Fund, and is a unique opportunity to have our local resources matched 1-for-1 by the state. And so we support staff's recommendation to figure out a way to come together with at least $1 million so that we can leverage another $1 million.
We're over time. Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to go to Abril Alcalá. We're going to go ahead and give you the ability to unmute yourself and share your 2-minute comment with this board.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair Lopez, members of the board, and fellow audience member in this Zoom call, as well as in the chamber. I am Abril Alcalá, and I am a Hartnell College student with the Salinas Valley. I'm a Hartnell College Salinas Valley Promise student. I have lived in Soledad, California for 15 years and finished high school here. I am currently studying psychology and just recently switched my second major to business with the intention of building and supporting small businesses in the future to help a lot of families by offering jobs. Being part of the Salinas Valley Promise has helped me grow and improve as a student. It has allowed me to make strong connections with other students, and as a result, we have been able to encourage one another and be each other's support system through our first year at Hartnell. I would like to respectfully thank you, Board of Supervisors, for your support and time, and to ask you to please continue to support the Promise Grant for future years. Thank you.
Thank you, Abril. Next, we're going to go to Prundale Chevron. If Prundale Chevron, we can now allow you to unmute yourself and share a 2-minute comment with us if you'd identify yourself for the record. Prundale Chevron.
Very good.
My name is Sheila Rose from Prundale Chevron. I am supporting the Prundale Senior Center, and I thank you, the Board of Supervisors, for being here for the community. I am asking to support the Prundale Senior Center. The seniors depend on their hot lunches and their activities that we have every day for them. We are hurting, as the community is hurting, for funding, and we need to help the seniors, and we would appreciate any support that we can get from the Board of Supervisors to keep the Prundale Senior Center going and to support our seniors of the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila. Next, we're going to go to Iris Gomez. Iris, we're going to go ahead and give you the ability to unmute yourself to share a 2-minute comment with this board.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Gomez, I think you muted yourself again.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. This is Iris Gomez from Bright Beginnings, and I'll be speaking on behalf of Daisy Hernandez, who wanted to provide a public comment but had a conflict with her schedule. My name is Daisy G. Hernandez. I am the Friends, Family, and Neighbor Educator at Community Action Partnership of San Luis Obispo County, Capslo, and a Monterey County resident. I facilitate playgroups for caregivers and the children in their care ages 0 to 5. Those who attend my playgroups express concerns over the lack of accessibility of high-quality childcare, preschool, and resources for young children. Without the security of a reliable and accessible ECE system, many parents, especially those from low-income backgrounds, rely on grandparents, friends, or neighbors to provide care. COVID-19 has added new challenges to parents and caregivers of young children. So I am here today advocating for economic relief for the childcare sector and safety measures for providers and families who before the pandemic were already experiencing anxiety over their ability to access early childhood education for their children. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. We appreciate your comments. Next, we're going to go to Julissa Portillo. Julissa, we're going to give you the ability to unmute yourself and share your 2-minute comment with this board.
Good afternoon. My name is Julissa, and I'm a student at Hartnell, and I'm going to be providing further comment on the Salinas Valley Promise program. I've been a part of the Salinas Valley Promise program since last summer. I am a biology student pursuing a biology major, and I want to pursue a medical career as a forensic pathologist. I have seen and also guided many students through their college journey. The Salinas Valley Promise program helps the students by covering their tuition expenses and helps the students focus and commit to our educational obligations without having to worry or stress on pursuing a part-time or full-time job. If we are as students able to maintain a job and fit it into our schedules, we're able to save and prepare for our future educational expenses. The Salinas Valley Promise program also offers a mentoring program that connects students with a dedicated mentor through the Mentor Perspective site. Having a mentor allows us to ask questions and have someone to look up to for advice. We also have staff mentors who are Hartnell College staff members that are available to us to go for questions and guidance. The Salinas Valley Promise program is dedicated and passionate to helping the students succeed through Hartnell and prepares us for higher education and the real world. Recently, Salinas Valley Promise program has provided us with helpful self-care resources to make sure that students are able to cope through the stress and anxiety that we are experiencing during quarantine in a healthy manner. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Portillo. Next, we're going to go to, we only have a first name, it's Alana. Alana, we're going to go ahead and give you the ability to unmute yourself. If you'd identify yourself for the record and share your 2-minute comment with us now. Alana?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Board Chair Lopez and supervisors. My name is Alana Miles, and I am a member of the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District Board of Trustees, and also I am the Chair of Community Human Services. Today, I'm speaking to you on behalf of Community Human Services. Community Human Services is partnering with Gathering for Women to provide aid, services, and short-term transitional shelter to 2 of the most vulnerable segments of our population, homeless women and families. The efforts will be, our efforts will be actuated through the remodeling of the building on Olympic Avenue in Seaside. And this transformed structure will become Casa de Noche Buena. Casa de Noche Buena will offer shelter and services for about 30 individuals. Community Human Services has a long, proven history in providing support to the communities of Monterey County. To name a few, they have the Homeless Youth Outreach Program, a drug rehabilitation, treatment and prevention programs, mental health services, and family and counseling and parenting programs. They also manage a sober living treatment facility. Together with Gathering for Women, which has established a successful support program for homeless women, these 2 organizations will be able to fill some of the critical need to shelter the homeless. But we cannot do it alone. Community Human Services and Gathering for Women would like your commitment to help provide operational funding to assist in ensuring the success of Casa de Noche Buena and its mission. Yes, we are living in very difficult times with many needs to consider, but what better way to show concern, compassion, and sincere commitment to the well-being of those of us who have the least than to fully support Casa de Noche Buena. So I'm
Thank you,
asking,
Ms. Miles.
thank you
We
for
appreciate
your support.
comment.
Thank you.
We're going to go to Christian Torres next. Mr. Torres, you'll now be given the ability to unmute yourself and share your comment with this board.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair Lopez and board members. I work for EAH, nonprofit affordable housing. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity in speaking with all of you today. I'm speaking on behalf of the Housing Trust Fund in the Housing and Economic Development Administration budget section on page 157. EAH would like to thank the board for the recent support on our Life Fighter Village project, 71 unit affordable housing development for veterans, including those with chronic mental illness. We look forward to lining up our remaining financing and hopefully start construction in 2021. In support of affordable housing development, we understand that the county may consider the implementation of Housing Trust Fund. EAH will be very much in support of this program and will encourage the county to continue its efforts to leverage state funding programs. As you may know, the state funding programs are becoming increasingly competitive, and the only way to ensure competitiveness is for projects to evidence local funding commitments. We have high confidence in county staff that they continue to strategically support critical projects and allocate housing trust funds to help meet the high demand of affordable housing. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. We're going to go into a person who's titled Call-In User-2. Call-In User-2 has their hand raised. We're going to go ahead and unmute that person. If it's somebody who called in by landline, this might be you. As we unmute you, we ask you to share your 2-minute comment after identifying yourself. Hello? Call-in User-2? Okay, so if you're on a landline and had raised your hand or wish to speak, we've unmuted your microphone. All right, let's go ahead and close that for now. This is, again, last call for public comment. This will be the only opportunity for public comment as we move through this agenda. So I'll make one last call for public comment. Seeing nobody in room. Call-in User-2 has raised their hand again, so let's try that one more time.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
My name's Fawn Mackey.
Can you do us a favor and turn down your speakers or your microphone in the background?
Is this on speakerphone? Yeah, okay. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services for over 20 years in Monterey County. I'm advocating for additional APS positions. Today, I will tell you about one of my most haunting cases. I was asked to do a safety check on a severely developmentally disabled diabetic woman with behavioral problems. On arriving at the home, I found her mother, a senior with advanced dementia, home alone. I then noted there was screaming from somewhere in the house. The house was dirty and had rodents visible. I followed the screaming and yelling to find the client I had come to see locked in a small closet. She had only a chair and a hot water heater in the space without room to move around. The closet reeked of feces and urine. There was a metal plate screwed to the door, front of the door, over a large hole that the client had clawed through over time, trying to get out. The abuser was a primary caregiver and worked full-time for the government while the client sat in total darkness in the closet, and her mother was left without care. APS was able to quickly work with the DA, who took the door into evidence, also with law enforcement, the local hospital where the client spent 2 months, and find family who conserved both the client and the senior, her mother. The abuser was convicted and went to jail. The client and the senior now live a good life with family support and supervision. APS serves more than seniors. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. Also, we work with the homeless, persons with physical or mental disabilities. We work on teams such as the MDOT, the Multidisciplinary Outreach Team for Monterey PD. We're on committees. We give community education and trainings. We cannot do this life-saving work without boots on the ground. Please consider the need for more APS workers in the communities that you serve. Thank you very much for your consideration and time today.
Thank you. We appreciate your comment. Okay, seeing no additional hands up via the Zoom and nobody else in chambers, we're going to close public comment and bring it back to this board. At this time, we're going to have some departmental presentations, and I believe
we have two email public comments.
Mr. Lorenzana shares with me that we have two emailed in comments. If you don't mind reading those into the record now.
Right, first one is from Diana. At the time you are considering the tenants, have you ever considered the landlord? I have two homes, but one of them I could only have the guts to rent some rooms out because it was the money from my retirement account. I used as my retirement savings since I lost money in the stock market. This seems the only safe place for me, but it looks like it's not a safe place anymore for us from your new bill. I am very nervous and so afraid these days that with your new bill, now that allows the renter to not pay the renter, but owner couldn't evict them. I couldn't sleep because one of my roommates had harassed me daily and laughed at me that I couldn't terminate our month-to-month agreement contract each other, and I couldn't evict him since your new bill protects him from the pandemic. I felt so sick with him since Monterey County has protection for him, so he starts to abuse and torture me as much as he wanted. This is insane. This bill is encourage bad people harm to a good landlord here. I don't own the house yet. The bank owned the majority of the property. I also lost my daily professional job to support the house and the renters if the renters are not paying their shares. I need the rents to be paid on time in order to pay for my mortgage, property tax insurance, HOA fee, and required processes for my future new job hunting. I don't understand how the Monterey County will only choose some categories of the peoples to be protected, but not other hardworking peoples that also damaged and harmed by the pandemic. Also, you actually use our money to protect others by force and without asking, but still we don't have extra money to help them. You are damage our life by doing so. This will harm my son and me. I am a single parent and my son still need me to support to survive. Please revise your bill. Do consider both sides to be fair. The landlord should not be discriminated by the county government, and you should not force to use our property to serve for public. It is not we're not willing to. It is because we cannot afford for it. It will bring us a lot of troubles now and in the future, financial health.
Thank you, Mr. Lorenzana. And your other comment?
Yes. Second one from Leon Sue. Dear board members, Monterey Weekly News reports that all of you approved eviction protection through July in Monterey County due to COVID-19. I have a tenant who used this news to refuse to pay rent. Even he got both stimulus check and unemployment check, and I still have a mortgage to pay. I hope you will be fair for both tenants and landlords in the future bills. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to bring it back for the departmental presentation.
Mr. Chair, before we go to that, could I just, for that comment about owner being threatened, I just wanted to make clear that if anybody's being civilly harassed, threatened, intimidated, or physically assaulted, they should certainly seek out help at either obtaining a civil restraining order or seeking out help at the DA's office. So anybody who's telling us that's happening, I want to just reassure them that there's some resources to deal with folks who are engaging in that type of alleged behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. We're going to go into our departmental presentations now. And I don't know, is Mr. Wood's going to call on folks? Mr. Vega will. Come on forward, Mr. Vega.
Mr. Vega's there.
Now we have County Council as the first department that will be presenting. The presentation is part already of the presentation that we have here, so you could just advance the presentation you had opened earlier. and go to county council, that would be great.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, members of the board. While the slide is being put up, let me get started. First, I would like to note that the slide that was in the published agenda last week was incorrect. I've provided a revised slide, which should be on the screen shortly. The County Counsel's Office is a service department. That is, we provide legal services to all the departments of the county, including the individual board offices as well as the Board of Supervisors as a whole. In order to perform that function, we need proper staffing. The budget that was presented to my office required me to find cuts totaling a little over $500,000. Accordingly, what I identified was 2 vacant Deputy 4 positions and 1 vacant Administrative Secretary position. I initially asked for those positions to be restored as part of an augmentation. You may ask, well, if they're vacant, do you really need them? I'll just point out that the positions are difficult to fill. My staff has been working very long hours, both attorneys and support staff, in order to keep up with the workload. In addition, I have 2 retired annuitants who are providing services to the county. And as you may recall, there are not only yearly limits on how many hours a retired annuitant can work, but there's also a length of time. They're not supposed to be permanent, if you will. So at some point in the very near future, I'm going to have to fill those services with full-time employees. Recognizing the difficult financial situation that the county is facing next year, I've revised my augmentation request. I do have 2 deputy positions that I'm willing to offer up to be cut, the Deputy 1 and 2. I'm asking that you restore the admin secretary and the 2 Deputy 4 positions. Accordingly, the revised augmentation request is down to $292,195. The services that I need the deputies to fill that I would recruit, based on my experience, I will not be able to find them at anything less than a Deputy 4 position. These are necessary services. I need a very experienced litigator. We have a lot of litigation going on right now, and I need somebody to step in and learn how to advise the treasurer, tax collector, the clerk, assessor, recorder office, as well as some other services. And as I said, I don't believe I can fill those at anything less than a Deputy 4 position. So I appreciate your consideration of this request. If I must, I will have to prioritize services that we can provide going forward in the future, because I can't keep asking my staff to work the long hours that they are currently doing so. So thank you for your consideration, and thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard.
Department that we have is the District Attorney.
Good afternoon, Chair and Supervisors. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. This is just a quick reminder of what we do. I wanted to point out that these things are all different activities that we use in terms of our prosecution type units. The gang crimes, sexual assault, homicide, domestic violence, most of the general felonies, the misdemeanors, and the cannabis enforcement, along with the officer-involved shooting investigations, public integrity, and advising law enforcement. Those are all things that come out of the general fund. But what doesn't come out of the general fund are our fraud units. These are outside monies, which include welfare fraud, auto insurance fraud, workers' comp fraud, our prison crime prosecutions, our victim witness assistance does not come out of general funds, and our consumer, where we deal with unfair business practices and such, environmental crimes, and our vehicular homicide, truancy abatement. These are all from outside funds. So the meat and potatoes are our general, real violent kind of criminal crimes, and those are funded by the general fund. So when we have to cut general fund monies, we can't cut from all the other outside funding. We have to cut
our core services, which are this, we call them our meat and potatoes. Next slide. So what have we done during COVID-19? Well, we've definitely been a team player. We supported the EOC by providing one of our two captains in our investigation unit to be the deputy director out there, and that was Captain Ramirez. We've provided investigators to provide EOC training, investigative aides to help with scheduling. We've provided attorneys and advocates to support the site build-outs. In terms of our consumer unit, which of course, again, is not funded by the general fund, we have 5 attorneys, multiple investigators. We've done hundreds of investigations just in the investigation of the SIP order alone. In terms of something Supervisor Parker mentioned earlier today about implicit bias training, you know, we do other things that are not prosecution oriented, directly prosecution oriented. And I'm gonna ring Captain Ramirez's bell again. Last year, we provided training to 500 law enforcement officers throughout the county of Monterey, San Benito, and the Sacramento DA's office, providing LGBTQ training in terms of acceptance and tolerance and working together. That was a 4-hour course, and Captain Ramirez actually led all of those trainings individually, and they were provided free to every local law enforcement agency, free to San Benito, and free to Sacramento. He is also certified in implicit bias training for the post, which is of course police officer standard training. And he also is an expert on principled policing, which we are continuing to offer these services to other investigators throughout our county, and then as we can to other police agencies. So we are trying to change that culture that is so problematic, that we're the reason why these protests are happening today. We're actively involved in addressing that from within our own department. One of the other things, next slide, please. So this is what you know that we do, the supervisors. The public may not understand it all, but we have a lot of cases referred throughout the year. We don't file every case that comes to us. Last year, we had over 18,000 cases that were referred. We filed only 2,400, and we had 12,000 misdemeanor cases filed. What's important about this is, you know, we file cases that we actually have proof on. We don't file every case that comes over. And we really need to have that proof to be beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the standard that we prosecute. Next slide, please. So our baseline budget required us to put up 4 filled DA positions, deputy DA positions, 3 filled legal secretary positions, 1 filled investigator position, 2 vacant DA investigators positions, 1 vacant investigative captain. That's like Captain Ramirez. We're going to be losing one of his level supervisors, and 1 of my attorney managers, managing deputy district attorney, plus $300,000 in our trial expenses. Next slide. So fortunately, the board gave some direction to the CAO's office, and they changed their recommendation to allow for us to keep the filled positions. Now, having that, and we're very thankful, and we ask the board to support that recommendation. But we are still losing the managing deputy district attorney, investigative captain, 2 investigators, 1 in civil and criminal, and our trial expenses. Now, the last item on this list, the conviction review attorney, that was something I've been trying to get funding for, have not been able to find the funding outside of the county. And I am hopeful at some point we'll be able to find the revenue to address this for those cases that new evidence has come up, or the appellate rights are gone, and we have an opportunity to open a case if there is some type of wrongful conviction. Next slide. So another side effect of the COVID-19 is this tsunami of cases. And this is impacting the courts. It'll impact the sheriff's department. This will probably, I know for sure, will impact the public defender and probation. But all of these cases that have been held off because the courts haven't been operational are waiting. And now we're opening the courts, and these cases are coming through. This workload will be pretty much intolerable in terms of the amount of cases. And we may need to address some of the levels of prosecution in terms of the types of crimes we prosecute if we are overwhelmed by the caseload, and which is why we're very thankful that the CO's office is recommending that we keep our attorneys. We absolutely need our attorneys to do this. What we're not going to be successful at is, since we're going to be losing a captain of investigations and 2 investigators, we won't be able to build these cases up as comprehensively as we would otherwise want to. Another issue that's going on in the county that we're trying to address is looking at cold cases. Now, these are cold case homicides. They could be back from 20, 30 years. Like the Hollyfield case was 21 years old, and we successfully prosecuted that this year. So we are trying to put together a task force for cold case homicides. We don't have the funding for that, and we don't have the personnel for that, but we have willing people that are anxious to participate. And we are blessed that a deputy chief from one of our local police agencies is set to retire at the end of June and is volunteering to help us pull that together and apply for a grant to get funding so that we can do additional DNA testing on some of our cold cases to try and build those cases up so that they become prosecutable offenses. Next slide. So these are just, this is a snapshot of the 2019 filings. And if we had to choose cases not to prosecute, I would definitely start with vehicle crimes that are not DUI related. These would be driving offenses, possibly reckless driving, possibly driving on a suspended license, driving without a license. The pullback there is that if we can't handle everything, we actually have to draw back on the type of cases we prosecute. If we don't prosecute these cases, then there's significant fines and penalties which will be lost in terms of revenue that goes to the general fund. And one more thing that I'd like to share with the board right now is that we have, as of June 1st, dismissed or reduced over 1,500 cannabis cases. These are cannabis cases that were previously felony cannabis cases, which qualified to be reduced to misdemeanors, and then other misdemeanors that were qualified to be dismissed. So we've submitted all of those applications to the court to accomplish that unilaterally. So I am available for any questions if the board has it, and I appreciate the time that you've provided me.
Supervisor Alejo.
Yeah, thank you, District Attorney Paccioni. Just 2 comments more like it. You already answered, you just finished answering my question, but I did want to, as a member of the Budget Committee, commend the District Attorney's Office and let the public know that this is probably our one department that has really done an excellent job in drawing down a lot of state grant dollars, more than any other department in Monterey County. So that's commendable that a lot of those outside dollars, and when you compare what other surrounding counties give to their DA's office, it's out of our normal coffers, it's much less because of all the grants that have been successfully drawn into our area. The question was just on the criminal justice reform, the ability to do that work, but you've already mentioned that you did a significant amount, 1,500 in a short amount of time. That's tremendous work. But the question was going to be whether under this budget you were going to be able to continue to do that. I know there's a lot of state changes, and sometimes they come without having the funding tied to it to be able to do that work. But with this budget before us, would you be able to, would you still have the ability to carry out some of that important work for the community in terms of dealing with those past sentencing changes?
Right. Well, I appreciate that, Supervisor Alejo. What happened is last year, there was a bill that was passed and it identified this as one of the unfunded mandates. So we took it to task, and because it's required, and we had to have it done by June 1. So we've been able to do that. So we don't anticipate moving forward that there will be any more of these qualifying offenses under that provision. They were already identified by the Department of Justice, and it was a matter of us going through the 1,500 cases to determine whether in fact they did qualify. So we don't have any further work on that. I do have some plans moving forward, which of course is dependent on available attorney time to do it. And that is to identify outstanding bench warrants on misdemeanor cases that have been outstanding for more than 5 years. There's a presumption that you won't be able to prosecute those cases. And rather than having these bench warrants stay out there, often warrants are a way to preclude people from getting access to services. We want to identify those misdemeanor cases which we would not be able to file or prosecute successfully if they ended up getting picked up on the warrant and brought back to court. So we want to identify those people and then see if we can move forward with getting those cases dismissed, because if we can't prosecute them, then it makes no sense that there's a bench warrant out there anyway. So that's another project I'm working on. That'll take a little bit more time.
Thank you.
Any other members of the Board of Supervisors have questions for our DA at this point? Seeing no hands going up, I do want to step back. I forgot to see if we had any questions of our County Counsel, Les Gerard. And I did see Supervisor Phillips' hand up as we started the second presentation. So I'll ask Supervisor Phillips if he has any questions.
No, I'm good.
Thank you. All right, seeing no additional hands going up, we'll keep on going. We're going to jump over to Henry Gonzalez, I believe, at the Ag Commissioner's office. Sheriff. Oh, the Sheriff.
I'm going to the Sheriff.
Ah, sorry. Very bottom of the page. Sheriff Bernal.
Thank you, Chair Lopez, members of the board. While we're waiting for the slides to load, I'd like to start off by saying I appreciate the board comments earlier. When something like this happens in Minneapolis that we saw last week, it really erodes the trust of the public has on all law enforcement from coast to coast. So you have my commitment as sheriff that we will do our best to hire the best applicants, provide the best training, and hold them to the highest standards here in Monterey County. I do need to say that the slides that were published in the agenda have been updated here. So these are updated slides. Opening, I'd like to say we face the same issues that every department faces: increased wages, pensions, healthcare. We aren't asking for any additional staffing other than just the status quo. I wish I could say that we didn't need to make a presentation this year and we can do our part like so many other departments and accept the recommended budget, but we have too much to lose in the recommended budget. We would put far less deputies on the streets over time. Many of the positions that have been cut in the recommended budget are essential in our 24/7 operations if they are cut, and the job still needs to be done. The jobs that would have to get done by temporary employees or employees working out of class or through increased overtime. We have equipment needs that are vital to the jobs that we do, and the equipment is reaching the end of life. We need to do all we can to look ahead to the future and plan for costs of equipment that we know we will need to replace, that will need to be replaced in the future. And what I would like to do is I would like to work with the budget office and be creative in coming up with an equipment replacement program like we did a few years ago with the vehicle replacement program. This will assure us that we'll have the funds or the majority of the funds needed to replace things like radios, bulletproof vests, and certain computers that we know would have to be replaced in the future. And if we can work towards this goal, then 10 to 20 years from now, our successors will look back and thank us for our forward thinking. This slide is a summary of the recommended budget cuts. It eliminates three correction specialist positions. 2 of them are filled, 1 of them is still vacant. It eliminates 1 filled property technician, and it eliminates a vacant correctional cook. There is no funding for 3 filled commander positions at $750,000. no funding for 20 vacant deputy sheriff positions, and no funding for 1 vacant sergeant position. The cost for all these augmentations is just over $4 million, and I will try to break down that $4 million in the following slides. So the impacts, 1, losing correction specialists will reduce our service capacity and slow many of the critical functions such as visiting, booking, inmate releases. These are the specialists who, when we release inmates, they take care of all the paperwork, make sure the calculations are correct. Court communications, all court communications are done through the correction specialists. This work still has to get done, and it's going to require the use of temporary employees or peace officers to complete these required tasks. Losing a property tech leaves us with 1 property tech to book and inventory all of the evidence that the deputy sheriffs bring in from crime scenes, rape kits, found property, confiscated firearms. Right now, we only have 1 property tech. We're in the process of trying to hire a 2nd property tech. This should be a 3-person unit. It's been a 2-person unit for quite a long time, but losing a property tech would really put us way behind in our evidence inventory. Deleting a correctional cook position would result in us using additional temporary help and overtime from the private sector, earmark our contract to fulfill these duties. Next slide. Last year, we had 4 commanders that retired, and after evaluating each position, we eliminated 1 commander by consolidating their duties. 3 sergeants promoted into these other positions, and when those sergeant ranks changed to commander, there was a data entry error in our finance department. So although the commanders were put into the performance budgeting system, the system did not show any salary expenses, and therefore 3 existing filled positions only have partial funding for benefits in this budget. Without the funding, we're going to have to absorb the total cost for salary and benefits for all 3 filled positions at approximately $750,000. The no funding for our deputy sheriff positions will cause patrol operations to stagnate at current levels. When we get behind on staffing, it takes years for us to recover. It will also completely hamper our recruitment efforts. The hiring process, academy, and initial training takes about 1.5 years. The sheriff's office needs these vacancies to keep as many recruits in the basic academies as possible, so there aren't large gaps in coverage between vacancy created and filled much later. When there are long gaps between a vacancy and filling those vacancies, it results in lower staffing and results in less overtime expenditures, lower staffing on patrol, and it's fewer deputies that are patrolling our streets. Overtime spending is trending downward with very promising numbers during times of peak coverage, which I will show you on the next slide. So as you can see from this slide, we ended last fiscal year with several retirements and several that went out on medical leave. We went from single-digit deputy sheriff vacancies to double-digit vacancies to start the current fiscal year. The first pay period in July, we paid just over $100,000 in overtime, as you can see. With a combination of summertime vacations, holiday vacations, and low staffing numbers, that number jumped to just over $300,000 the next pay period and averaged around $300,000 until the end of December. In January, we went to a 12-hour shift schedule in corrections as a pilot program for a year, and we immediately saw a dramatic improvement in our overtime dollars. In February, you see a spike in overtime, and that was the AT&T Pro-Am. But our normal overtime stayed steadily low when you take away that spike and the dollars that were reimbursed by the AT&T Pro-Am. The next pay period after the Pro-Am, we put our patrol bureau on 12-hour shifts. And this helped to keep that trend of overtime even lower. and we are able to staff our South County and coastal stations full-time, and that's something that we haven't been able to do for several years. This is also a pilot program, and although we have wider coverage, we are thin on staffing numbers and risk fatigue in both bureaus with these 12-hour shifts. As you can see, in March, the trend kept going down. The COVID pandemic hit and the courts were closed down. We moved 10 bailiffs from courts to fill the staffing shortages in the jail, and our overtime went down to all-time low levels. As you can see, that if we can get caught up on hiring and fill at least 10 vacant positions, it would help us considerably in our overtime. Next slide. So right now, an unknown is our jail population. With bail reform possible and always the talk of the state trying to reduce the prison populations, we end up having to take the burden of the state's lower prison population in our jail. Right now, the inmate count is at an all-time low in the low 600s, and this is due to the pandemic. We can manage this lower population with our current staffing comfortably, but once we get through this pandemic and we open the jail expansion, we don't know what the jail population might do. The jail expansion is going to add 576 beds to our total capacity, which will bring us to a total capacity of one bed over 1,400. The current plan is to occupy the expansion along with the existing women's section, the dormitories, and A, B, and C pods, which our JBCT program is in one of those pods. We will vacate the remainder of the main jail, which is D through J pod, K pod, and the rehabilitation center. So the available beds in the sections that we are going to occupy would be 900. The current staffing we have is sufficient to staff those areas. And the current population, as I said, is at historic lows. And that's due to fewer arrests right now, expanded OR, and just the few court proceedings and zero bail. If the inmate population rises above 900, the newly occupied spaces in the jail will be too small to house the inmates. And we're going to have to open up the additional housing units that we have to be able to house additional inmates. And we're going to have to staff them with additional deputies. So to schedule one person to cover a post 24/7 requires 5 full-time employees. If the new space becomes overcrowded and we need to open up more housing units, that would be 5 employees per housing unit that we have to open up. The next slide. So the personnel augmentations, this is just a review of the personnel augmentations, the correctional specialist, the deleted correctional cook, to fully fund our commander positions that were overlooked, fund the filled property technician position, and restore as many vacant deputy sheriff positions as can be funded, and restore a vacant sheriff or sergeant position. Although we would love to have all of our deputy sheriff positions restored, we ask that you restore as many as you possibly can so we can continue to put recruits in the academy this next year and keep from falling behind on patrol. Next slide. So this is just kind of a running total of what we're asking. This is all in all, to stay status quo, is just over 4 million. We kind of tweaked the number that was shown earlier, and we entered the number of new recruits, and that brings it to just over $4 million. If we just fund the correctional specialists, the cook, and the unfunded commanders and the property tech, we're looking at just over 1 million. If we can fund at least half of the deputy sheriff vacancies, we're looking at just above 2 million. We could keep our heads above water if we can fund at least half of those vacant deputy sheriff positions. Next slide. So finally, our equipment augmentations, and we are asking you to authorize the purchase of new portable public safety radios, which will replace the aged and failing radios that we currently have. The Harris radios that our deputies use have reached the end of life. When they fail, they can no longer be updated and they're just rendered useless. We are the last law enforcement agency in Monterey County still using these obsolete radios. We use them not only for law enforcement, but for rescuing people in the backcountry, such as Big Sur and along the coast, Los Padres Forest. Motorola has a new APX 8, or it's the last generation radio is the Motorola APX 8000. This is a big improvement over the radios we have now. And although it's an older product, it will improve our communications. And this is at a cost of $2.1 million. We have been working very closely for the past year with Motorola, trying to figure out a way we can come up to fund this to get the cost. I think we were almost there at the end of last year, but we weren't able to come up with the funding to make it happen. Their newest technology, as you can see on the right, is the Motorola APX next generation radio. This is their newest technology. This is at a cost of $2.5 million, slightly higher than their last generation, but it represents a significant upgrade compared to their older versions. And what this radio can do that no other radio can do is we can transmit and receive via the traditional public safety radio frequencies, but we can also transmit and receive over cell phone towers and Wi-Fi signal. So this is going to greatly improve our communications and even our poorest coverage areas, such as Big Sur, South Monterey County, and the mountainous areas. And this is at a cost that's just slightly higher than their last generation of radios. If we can go to the next slide. There's a couple of finance options that we've talked to the budget office about. Motorola offers a lease program. It's a 2.6% finance charge, and they will lease these radios for 3 to 10 years. They'll defer the initial lease payment for an entire year. So if we lease these radios at a 2.6% finance charge, we wouldn't have to make a payment until July or August of next year. What we've also talked to the budget office about is utilizing one-time money to make the initial purchase. If it's county financed, if we can do it, if it's possible, if we can come up with a yearly payment program and establish a smaller scale program that's similar to our vehicle replacement program to address future radio needs, we'd like to try and make that happen. Future radio replacements would be fully funded via yearly payments when these radios are no longer serviceable. And then I don't know if we have one more slide. So this is just a summary of our augmentation requests. We're asking you to restore the positions that I talked about, but provide direction on the purchase of the new portable public safety radios and financing. And once the pricing terms and financing are formalized, the project would return to the board at a later date for formal approval. I know we're going backwards, and but I'm trying my best to minimize the reduction of services to the community the best I can. And I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any questions from members of the board? All right, I'm going to go with Supervisor Parker first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate your presentation, and I really was glad to see the shift in overtime expenses with the change in the length of the shifts and so on. Did you say that so I saw the spike with AT&T. Are we being fully reimbursed on the cost of providing deputies for the AT&T and other events? It seems like this might be a good time to really make sure, since we are not having that many events, we may want to make sure that we're structuring those arrangements in a way that makes sure that those costs are reimbursed.
Yes, absolutely. We are being reimbursed 100% by AT&T Pro-Am, And also when we work events like Car Week or last year we had the US Open, we are being fully reimbursed for our staffing out there.
Okay,
And
great.
equipment costs.
Great, thank you. So I'm a little confused about some of these positions that that seem to have been filled positions where they're either being eliminated or not funded. And I had understood that there were 22 or so. There were filled positions that were originally on the chopping block. We said, no, let's try to maintain, across all the departments, let's try to maintain the filled positions. So I guess it's the corrections specialists that were filled and somehow not included. So I'm wondering about that. And I do have a question about the commanders. That's a different situation. But so if you could just explain the corrections specialists.
The correction specialist positions were filled after the recommended budget. 2 of them are filled. 1 of them is still vacant. And I'm not sure.
Okay.
Was there a question about one of the?
Yeah, no, I just wondered why it didn't match up, but that's why they were hired after the the recommended budget came out. And then in terms of the commanders, I guess I'm a little stunned that I can understand how there'd be like a paperwork issue maybe, but does that mean that the salaries for the sergeants were I guess I'm just trying to understand how the full cost of these commanders, rather than a marginal increase, how this could have happened. And I'd like to hear from the budget office what they recommend about what we should do about this.
Would that? I'm not sure if Dwayne's going to jump in or not here.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dwayne with the CO's office. So my understanding was there was a code that needed to be input at the department level that wasn't done. So the only thing that was funded was the benefits side of those positions. So the salary side's not. Just so the board understands what we would have had to have done to bring those to funded level if this hadn't happened, we would have had to basically move money from their overtime budget to fund the filled positions. That would have been the original recommendation had this issue been caught in time before the recommended budget went forward. That would have been how we would have solved that gap, is use the overtime, because one of the things we did in this recommended budget was to also augment or leave more money in the overtime than they had in the prior year.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as the radio, I guess, Dwayne, while you're there, I think the radio's question, obviously either way, well, if we go with the lease, there will be a charge that the sheriff's office is going to have to come up with on an annual basis. And also if there's a one-time payment and we set up a replacement fund, that also is going to have ongoing impacts. And I guess I'd like to hear a little bit about kind of the pros and cons of those 2 approaches and what you might recommend.
Yeah, so clearly from a financial standpoint, a lease is always more expensive than if you were to do an outright purchase. However, many times you'll go into a lease because you're not capitalized, you don't have the funds up front in order to purchase the equipment. I think the concept is of creating a replacement fund is of great value, and we've done that across many of the county different programs. And in this time of crisis that we're in right now, what you find is it allows us to do things that had we not done that decades ago for certain areas, we wouldn't be able to do things today. So it's a very good program to set up. it takes some pain and suffering to start those programs because you have to take money out of current day operations and set it aside. And that's why if a department is very committed and understands the importance of where they have to prioritize their funding, we look at the sheriff's department and say, okay, now if we can get you set up with these radios, what can you bring to the table from your operations, lower cost, so that you start reserving funds so you go 10 years from now or 5 years from now when you need a replacement, we're not in the same place. And we did that with the sheriff's office. It must have been probably 5 years ago on the vehicle replacement. And I can't remember the last time they came to the board and said, well, we don't have cars. And so what it does is it really creates a situation where the need just disappears from the constraints that counties go under. But it takes a lot of discipline to set those up, but I'm 100% behind that discipline. It's just how you get there is generally difficult, especially now.
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Adams.
Thank you. So I have a procedural question, Chair. Is this when we're going to give our opinion on what we think we should be doing for each of the departments as we go through?
You can either do that now or you can do it afterwards. It depends on, obviously on the first few we haven't commented, but if you'd like to make a recommendation to staff now, feel free.
Yeah, well, I support the thought of filling the positions that were missed in the recommended budget. I don't think that it's appropriate for the sheriff to be penalized because it takes a long time to hire people. And the same with the request for the 3 commander positions. I think if it was a clerical error, I don't think that he should be punished for that. I agree that we should be looking at a VAMP approach to ensuring that funding is available for the future purchase of equipment. But my other question, the overarching question, I'm trying to kind of keep a list of the requested augmentations. Would this mean the actions that I just mentioned, would that mean $1 million for staff and $2 million for the radios? Perhaps Dwayne could help me with that answer.
Mr. Vega is nodding his head yes.
Yeah, and I would probably say, you know, I would, again, for the commander positions, I would probably say go to their overtime and move the monies. For the positions that they hired after the recommendations were already made, then I would probably say, then if the board wants to go ahead and backfill those, then you would go and find sourcing either probably from contingencies on those, at least for this period of time. But I would probably recommend for the 3 commanders, since they were already part of the base and the department just had an error in their input, we were not going to give them extra money for those. We would have just shifted money.
So what would the number be that you would assign to them for the augmentation request about?
So I would ask Ezekiel if he has the actual number, but it would be the 3 commanders, which would be in the I don't have the exact dollars on it, but we can bring that back to you.
Yeah, commanders was estimated about $745,000 for the commanders.
Okay, and then the radios?
The radios are roughly
slide preview or the next. There you go.
Yeah, radios are $2.5 million, and you'd have to find some one-time sourcing for that.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks very much.
Supervisor Alejo.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just in response to Supervisor Adams' comments, I think all of us today need to kind of consider this budget in light of what's going across our nation here. We just had, I think, over 500 young people pass by LSL. Now they're in front of City Hall. Pretty sizable crowd, mostly young people. And I think when we're making decisions about this budget, I think it's a tight one. Every department's having to make sacrifices. And I understand the sheriff's needs, and he's been making a lot of good changes in his department. I appreciate that. But I want to talk about 2 things. One, about the ability for the county to fund everything, because we're going to go to other departments and some are making sacrifices and everybody got to their wish list. But we have to be cognizant of where we're at also, that we're gonna have to cut social services programs, and we can't fund everything in every other department. For us to do that today would be not as if we're tone deaf to what's happening down the street even in our own community and across the nation. So I want to say two things. I think today would be a good opportunity, even looking, self-reflecting in our own county. What are we doing to address some of the issues that are being discussed locally and from the West Coast to the East Coast about what can we do to address some of the needs of how we carry services in our community, in particular to our law enforcement department for Monterey County. I even if it's very brief, Mr. Sheriff Renown, I don't mean to put you on the spotlight, but hopefully you or Under Sheriff Minot, in light of what's going on, just maybe I just got this point and then another on the radios, which is what are we doing in recent years? And I know you guys have done a lot because California probably has the most rigorous standards on training, the use of lethal force, on racial profiling. There's been a lot of legislative changes in the last 3 or 4 years. And I just wanted to see if you could just let the community know, as we're asking for funding, what have we done to address some of these issues locally and in recent years to address what is being discussed nationally? I know it's not perfect everywhere in California, as we just saw the beating of Elijah Tufino in Rancho Cordova last month. And that was one cop who I think who wasn't living up to the highest professional standards. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to, in light of what's happening outside, to just tell the community, what have we done as an office to address some of these issues that I think are critical for the community here at this time. And I meant to put out there, to just give some brief explanation of what we've done here locally.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. I know DA Paccioni mentioned the LBGTQ training. We hosted that training here at our office also. One thing that I've been, a big supporter of, and we've hosted training at our office for the past several years, for at least the past 3 or 4 years here at our office, and that's the critical incident training, where we host at least 3 of those critical incident trainings a year at our office. We have participation from officers all over Monterey County, from every law enforcement agency in Monterey County take part in those, and we take those trainings very seriously. As far as other training, I've got the undersheriff here with me also, who might be able to help jog my memory of what else we might be doing here.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. So one critical piece, Supervisor Alejo, of the CIT, that training has a lot to do with de-escalation and how to take volatile, rapidly emerging situations and really try and guide those towards a very as pleasant or as peaceful of an outcome as they can be. The sheriff's been committed to that. We're really appreciative of the County Behavioral Health Department for them coming over here, and we've put a ton of peace officers through that, because really a lot of these uses of force that we see that unfortunately make headlines, they all, the vast majority of those are around rapidly evolving, really volatile, very, very dangerous situations. And so I think that training has been a key component. We've stayed up on and continued to update for all of our less than lethal options, to try and make sure that our deputies have the best equipment. So when these things do take on a bad turn, they can still resolve at the greatest, with the greatest opportunity to reduce the risk of injury to the public that we serve and to the deputies that are doing that tough work. And as you know, we just cut the ribbon on our JBCT program. That's another big thing to try and reduce violence and bad outcomes in the jail. We have with all the new legislative changes between Senator Caballero's bill last year, our training department is working hard on those to get those things out, so we can get those to not all of our peace officers, but all of the peace officers across the county that serve the public. And we're committed to making sure that we have that training, that we have the de-escalation techniques, and that we get all of those use of force mitigating things that that the senator put in her bill last year, and have those all rolled out in our county before the end of the year.
Thank you for that. And I think it was important for the community to say, are we even asking these questions even as we're talking about the department's budget? So thank you for that. And I know I think we're committed as a board of supervisors to continue to work with you to make sure that all those trainings and requirements and our behavioral health department will continue that work to hopefully continue to provide the highest quality of service to the community and be able to de-escalate when those incidents do arise in our community, because as we know that they will eventually. The other question was just on more, I get the issue on equipment because some of these things are basic necessities when you're a first responder, and it doesn't matter whether you're an EMT or firefighter or police officer, you need to have that ability to communicate with dispatch and with your colleagues out in the field. But if I don't think it's been adequately explained about the problems happening with this particular Harris company, about from what I hear, the ineffectiveness of the radios, the batteries. Is Harris fulfilling its contractual obligation in terms of updates to software, replacement parts, batteries, also whether there should be, should be part of a larger county conversation, because from what I hear, all other law enforcement also use Harris. And if there's going to be a move to Motorola, are other departments, are other cities also looking to do the same? And whether if they're not fulfilling the contractual obligation, should there be a joint legal action to get them to fulfill their obligations or to recoup some of this money back, so we could use it to get a different type of equipment if they have not done what they had promised to do years back?
Supervisor, that's a great point. One thing that's really challenging with these handheld radio, this equipment, is it does have an effective shelf life or usefulness life. And as we've gone through different iterations of radios, certainly over the course of my career, they have an effective life, and as it's just like anything. Imagine having a 10-year-old cell phone in your pocket right now. It just doesn't have the capabilities that it did when it was brand new. As the infrastructure changes and the software updates, the battery lives get shorter, and then ultimately the availability of parts and service starts to go by the wayside, because they just don't support the equipment. We can't get support on a Windows 7 anymore. So we had to upgrade, and it's very similar with those radios. And you nailed it. They are critical, not just for our deputies to communicate with one another, but we've had times where deputies are inside a house and they're asking to borrow somebody's landline so they can talk to the comm center to direct an ambulance in. And it's just, I don't want to throw any rocks at Harris, because that product has lasted us 10 years. It's we're the last agency in the county. All the other police agencies have moved on from Harris, and that's not a knock on them. It's just they really do have a shelf life. And one of the things the sheriff talked about was this whole concept of a VAMP style program, because ultimately this is high dollar, expensive stuff that's positively critical to us getting services to the community. And the important thing is with trying to work with the budget office and put that together, the goal there, Supervisor, is that whoever's doing what we're doing in 7 or 8 or 10 years from now, and whoever's doing whoever's the next board of the future, they don't have to have this discussion. And Dwayne really nails that we're not back there saying we need money for cars, and that's a direct result of VAMP. And no matter what, we could buy the best radios in the world, and 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now, we're going to need new ones because the stuff just wears out. So it's a great question. It's just one of those high dollar ongoing needs that we're always going to have today and into the future.
Anything else, Supervisor Alejo? You're on mute. Sorry.
So the follow-up real quickly is for Mr. Woods or Mr. Vega, just to elaborate on, could there be a financing mechanism where over years, the portion to fund these radios would then be repaid back by the sheriff's department in future budget years?
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Dwayne here. So I think the initial problem is the upfront funding to do the replacement. And then once that gets sourced, or if that gets sourced in a way, then without a doubt, the funding will be coming directly from the sheriff's budget every year to build the reserve for the future replacement. Now that will, since the sheriff's really heavily dependent on discretionary dollar, it becomes almost a discretionary reserve. But there are some revenue streams they have, like when they do work for outside vendors and they bill in their cost in that. So there is some other grant revenues. So it does allow you to leverage, so that even though it's mainly discretionary, you can leverage other programs that get benefit from this equipment. The biggest problem is which route do you go if you decide you want to go the upfront initial purchase or lease of this equipment. And then once that decision is made, where are you going to go for the funding to do either one of those?
And if I might add on your earlier question, Supervisor Alejo, about getting our money back from Harris, I believe it was. These are radios that I inherited when I took over as sheriff. We weren't happy with these radios from the very beginning. They didn't seem to work correctly from the very beginning. I know about 5 or 6 years ago, I worked with county council to try and get out of that contract. And it was a battle trying to get out of the contract, because we had to show that Harris would fix the problem, but then another problem would pop up and they would fix it. And as long as they would fix it, we were bound to our contract. So we tried many years ago to get out of that contract with Harris to try and get our money back, and we just weren't able to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, then we're going to go over to Supervisor John Phillips.
Yeah, just looking at this, I would certainly fund 2 of the correctional specialist positions, at least 2. Obviously, I think we have to fill and fund the 3 filled commander positions. I think probably it would be unwise not to fill the property technician, and I would fill maybe 8 of the vacant deputy positions. Just looking at it, and I'm in favor of doing something with the radios. If maybe we can push a little bit and get the price down a little bit. They may need the business these days, and I'd rather see us come up with some finance arrangements so we don't have to come up with that money, especially this year, up front. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Supervisor Phillips. I too am supportive of funding the filled positions. That question of radios, I had a conversation with the sheriff, and I understand there's an option in there for a lease, and it's a 12-month without a payment lease. So my thought was, if we put 1.25 in this year from this year's budget, made that purchase, say middle of July, then that would give us next year's budget to pay the second 1.25 without a penalty or ever paying any interest on that cost. So it would spread the pain over 2 years out of cannabis and put it at no interest, and allow us time to start up that VAMP fund as well, to cover the costs in the future. So that's something that I'll ask for support on. And then in terms of the positions for deputies coming out of the academy, I guess my question is, in terms of the timing, as those folks come on board, what does that look like? Are you anticipating additional retirements, Sheriff? And do you imagine those people coming in and filling positions that are being vacated, or what is your current need right now?
So right now, like I said, we've been really trying to push really hard on recruiting. We just haven't had the numbers. The state of California, it's the same story in every police agency throughout the state of California, just not getting the numbers to come out and test. What I'm hoping is, in this economy right now, we're going to have more people coming out to test that want steady jobs with benefits, that lost out because of this pandemic, have either been laid off or were self-employed and want to be cops with good paying jobs. But right now, I mean, we got surprised last June or July with several retirements. Like I said, last year we were in single digits, and we're up to about 22 vacant positions, I believe we are right now. If we can fill, we have 2 academies coming up, and we always shoot for 10 recruits per academy. But if we can get at least half of that, we'd be looking pretty good and keeping our head above water.
Okay. So in terms of direction for staff, is there, on this, was there anything else from the members of the board at this point? We can come to it later after presentations, but
Yeah.
I'll ask you raise
Sure.
your hands to be recognized. Supervisor Alejo.
Yeah, just on your proposal, like I said, I think we should probably wait till the end. But again, I think our board needs to be thoughtful that we're going to make, we're not fulfilling a lot of other requests to a lot of other departments, and we can't give everything here. I think we could give some, and certainly equipment should be a priority, as that's life and safety for our officers out on the beat or in the jail. I get that, but what I'm hearing is like, let's fund everything, and that's I don't think that's the message we could give. While when we go to these other departments, we're not saying the same to them. So I think we should hold off and look at the big picture, and then basically seeing what this would cost and what it adds up in compared to other things, and changes we're going to make to this proposed budget before us. Thank you.
And if I might say one more thing, I came in here not expecting to fund all these unfunded deputy sheriff positions, but if we can get somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 10, and that somewhere in there fund those, that would help get us recruits into the upcoming academies this year and help us stay ahead of the curve on our, this year and a half process of trying to replace retirements. So we are going to have some retirements coming up in the rest of this calendar year.
And I appreciate that, Sheriff Bernal, recognizing the situation that we're in and what we're doing to other departments as well. So I appreciate your words. And I expressed this last year when we talked about new positions in last year's budget, which I knew that we were going to have continued challenges because of the pay raises we were negotiating still with all of our employees. So I'm not saying it's like I'm trying to be that watchdog, saying what can we afford and what we can't. And certainly a lot of those increased costs on a lot of the pay raises that we just approved, we have an impact. And not to mention everything else Mr. Vega mentioned earlier on workers' comp and healthcare and pension costs. So I want us to just be, watch every dollar and everybody having to get a little less so that it's fair across the board. And I think that's the message we should be sending, and what I think other department heads want to see and hear from this Board of Supervisors as well. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Supervisor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I had raised my hand because I wanted to ask a kind of a process question. I'm not prepared to give any final direction or anything on this particular department's budget because I don't know what else is coming. But I agree with my fellow budget committee member that we have to be very careful about committing ourselves to ongoing costs, because this is not just the budget. It's not one and you're done with this budget. We're going to be coming back in the next few months and trying to figure out how we're going to cope with even further revenue reductions. So I just want us to be just incredibly cautious about what we commit to laying out there in terms of, one-time costs or ongoing costs. It's going to be quite the juggling act. And so anyway, I do want us to be able to return after we've gone through all the departments with their requests to see how we want to prioritize and what things we feel like we can commit to and those that we may not be able to this time.
No, we will. My comment was more in general, and in direction was the wrong word. It was more about sort of voicing your opinion. But Supervisor Adams.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I agree with my colleagues, Supervisors Alejo and Parker. I feel like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse in a certain sense, because there are some things that we haven't even agreed on that are overarching as we look at how we want to proceed with the budget presentations and how we're going to make the determination on what we do recommend. And we don't know what's coming up next. And I think we have to be so conscious of this because you know that the entire workforce, our entire county workforce has just got to be filled with anxiety as they look at us looking at this budget, knowing as the rest of us do that we're at the edge of a cliff. And I think that it really requires an overarching view of the entire budget before we can make actual determinations. Even though I made comments about the sheriff's budget, I do feel that it would have been more prudent for me not to have done so as I think of it now. Be that as it may, I just wonder if we could have like a short conversation about how we want to proceed with this. I think I mentioned to you, I have a critical appointment that I have to attend at 4:30 today. And I just don't want to miss this. To me, this is the most important thing that we do all year long. And I'm just wondering if we could have just a little bit of time about how we want to proceed as we look at the rest of the budget presentations, and then how we are going to deal with making determination, what we want to look at as the kind of as the overall parameters. So just throwing that out there for your consideration.
So the way that I see us working through this is we have 3 additional presentations from the Ag Commissioner, Elsa Jimenez of the Health Department, as well as Lori Medina. And so I imagine us getting through those and then coming back and working through these as they were laid out in this agenda, as well as any other requests from supervisors. Now, in the question of timing, I agree this is the most important thing we do, and we have to try to get as much done as we can today. Whatever we don't finish will be done tomorrow morning. And I know you had an appointment at 4:30 that you needed to be off by 4 for, but I can't guarantee that we'll be done by then today. We want to get through at least the presentations today and maybe start the conversations and see how far we can get, because this is the most important thing we do all year. Obviously understanding that there's still a time frame issue in terms of finishing this up so that departments know where they're headed soon. Supervisor Alejo.
Oh, no, I was just gonna add, and beyond the presentations, we still have the conversation on the consent items as well. So there's a lot more to talk about.
Right. So with that question in mind then, Supervisor Alejo, are you referring then like to the CAO's office? Because we haven't had an opportunity to discuss anything about the budget that was put forward with the CAO, as well as
right. Everything else on consent. Yeah, there's quite a few items.
Yeah, RMA, CAO, a lot of things that we got to discuss.
Yeah, a whole lot more than just 3 presentations. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Sheriff. We're going to go ahead and head over to the Ag Commissioner for the next presentation. Mr. Gonzalez, if you'd unmute yourself.
I am unmuted. And good afternoon, Chair Lopez, members of the board, Mr. McKee, Mr. Gerard. Thank you for the opportunity. Today, I'm not asking for any augmentation or additional funding, but I do want to share a little bit about what the Ag Department does to provide value to the County of Monterey. I want to first start by saying that agriculture has been deemed by the FDA, USDA, and Department of Homeland Security as part of the nation's critical infrastructure. And ag is also critical to the County of Monterey, providing $4.26 billion in 2018. And every year there's $4.5 billion that the ag industry generates. And most of it is spent here locally. The county is very valuable, not only to the nation, but to our county residents here. We are the fourth largest ag producing county in the state and in the nation. Next slide, please. So this slide is just a reflection of our 2018 crop report, our most recent crop report. And what it shows is the top 10 crops, but it also shows the diversity of crops that we have here in Monterey County. And this is only the top 10. There's approximately 80 crops that we grow. But in here, you'll see that the great majority are fruits and vegetables, which are the most healthiest of all farm products for us to have and grow. Very valuable to not only our county, to agriculture, but to everyone throughout the nation and the world, because we do export everywhere. Next slide, please. Here in 2014, we published this economic contributions of Monterey County agriculture, just to see what was the multiplier effect. How far does that $4.25 or so, $4.5 billion that are generated annually, how far does that resonate through the local economy? Next slide, please. These are the highlights of that economic contributions report, and that $4.25 or so billion that's generated annually by the ag industry, it balloons up to over $8 billion once it starts to get spent here in the local economy, when farmers buy trucks, tractors, their employees who get paid from that $4+ billion, when they go out and spend their money, it reverberates throughout the local economy to the tune of over $8 billion. Jobs that agriculture produces or provides for us here locally, over 76,000 jobs, at least according to the report from 2014. And then also about $100 million in local ag business taxes to help us all do what we do. Next slide, please. Here is just a picture of the people that make up our department. These are the essential agriculture workers of Monterey County. Next slide, please. The mission statement of the Ag Department is to promote and protect agriculture, the environment, and the public welfare, and to assure consumer and business confidence in the marketplace. Next slide, please. And this is one of the ways that we help to assure consumer and business confidence in our local marketplace. The Ag Commissioner is also the sealer of weights and measures. We check, for one thing, gas pumps to make sure that they're pumping a gallon of gas. You see the sticker there in the middle. That is the seal that assures folks that when you buy a gallon, it's actually a gallon. And we check many other different measuring devices, including price scanners, scales, gas dispensers, taximeters, gas and electric meters. We'll even do firewood, and we do quantity control inspections as well. And again, to assure consumer and business confidence in the marketplace. It's something that I believe most of us don't even give it a second thought when we go through and buy something that we're getting what we're paying for. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the critical infrastructure that agriculture provides for our nation, and the Ag Commissioner's Office, our department is part of that. And we work together with the USDA, their logo up in the upper right, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, their logo in the lower right hand, and then the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And then put agriculture in the middle because we do work with the industry. All of us together work on these issues and are part of the critical infrastructure of agriculture for our nation. Next slide, please. One of our main activities is what we refer to as pest detection, and it's merely that we are looking for pests generally invasive species that we don't have here and we don't want them here. And so we have traps throughout the entire county, excuse me. And our goal is to detect these populations of pests, and it can be bacteria, it can be viruses, weeds, any kind of pest that might come into the county. We want to know right away while that population is still small and we can knock it out. And this helps us reduce the need for pesticides and also avoid quarantines that other nations may slap on us. Next slide, please. We also conduct what we refer to as pest exclusion. We enforce state, federal quarantines. We inspect shipments of plant and plant products coming into the county. And then we also inspect and then certify, if they pass the inspection, a document called a phytosanitary certificate. And also we issue certificates of quarantine compliance. And that's just a document that says this shipment has been inspected and it is clean of pests of concern to the importing jurisdiction. Next slide, please. These are the numbers that are generated. This again is from 2018, and this chart here shows the numbers of those phytosanitary certificates that we issue. The kind of goldish, yellowish color, those are the federal, I'm sorry, those are the state phytosanitary certificates that are sent along with the produce that we grow here and send throughout the nation to those states and areas that they can't produce what we produce here. The blue columns, those are the federal phytosanitary certificates. You can see that in 2018, we had a total of 18,639 federal phytosanitary certificates, and then a total of 15,667 state phytosanitary certificates. And these certificates are issued for every shipment. So a shipment is one person sending a shipment to one importer, and the shipment can contain a number of different commodities. So within these numbers of individual certificates are tons and tons of our produce that we send throughout the country and the world. Next slide, please. We're also, as Ag Department, responsible for many other aspects of agriculture. We are involved with policing, direct marketing, farmers markets, nursery and seed quality and standardization. We do produce quality and standardization inspections. We also inspect for organic requirements. We are also one of 3 counties in the state that are an organic certifier. We actually certify organic operations. Next slide, please. And now we're also working in cannabis and hemp. To us, just more commodities. They are distinct, but we still work with our programs in both commodities, cannabis and in hemp. We still issue pesticide permits. We deal with quarantines that may be in place with these crops. We also require registrations, at least for hemp growers. We issue nursery license if they're going to be a nursery. And we also, of course, with our weights and measures, we're checking the scales, make sure that they are appropriate and certified and registered. Next slide, please. And of course, the always very important pesticide use enforcement program. This is one of our biggest programs. We are a large producer of ag, like I just mentioned, worldwide. But we also need to protect these plants. The vegetables and fruit that we produce are very succulent. They're very susceptible to fungi, to insects, bacteriums, viruses. And so these crop protection materials, pesticides, are used to protect the crops. And so we want to make sure that those products are used safely, appropriately, and without hurting anybody. If things happen, then we take action to a penalty, a fine, to make sure or help assure that it doesn't happen again. So next slide, please. We're the only county in the state that has a farm worker advisory committee. And this what's in the slide there is just a picture of a card that was developed by this farm worker advisory committee at the Ag Commissioner's office. And it's a card, an informational card, and it's in Spanish, but on the right-hand side, you can see what it says, and it talks about if you have questions about pesticides, call the Ag Commissioner's office that tells folks about their rights against retaliation, about being able to file complaints, and provide some of the information that we need. This is also unique to the County of Monterey. I'll share with you that right now that we're dealing with the COVID virus, we've also created another card to provide information to the farm workers about what they need to do, what are the symptoms of COVID, who can they call for assistance and help. Those cards, I'm told, will be in our hands Wednesday. So we're going to be distributing them with our partners, the ag industry and our ag advocate friends. There's many folks that want to help distribute these cards. The idea is that we get these cards into the hands of every worker so they have a handy dandy place where they can refer to information about the COVID-19 and also help them establish that they are an essential worker and as such have some level of precedence to get tested for the virus. Next slide, please. Our pesticides around schools pilot project. It's coming to an end, but the grant is anyway. So it's not going to change the focus that we have about pesticide use around schools. I know the growers are very focused on this. We make sure that they're focused on this. We spend probably more attention on use around pesticides around schools than any other combination of situations, and for very good reason. We want to protect the children at the schools. Next slide, please. Anyway, that's on my last slide. So I've added a little bit to my last slide about if you ate today, thank a farmer and a farm worker. I've now added also thank our Ag Commissioner staff who as essential workers have been out there. They have not lost a day of work. They've been out there. They've been wearing masks even before they were required for their own protection, because we need to protect them as well as all of the ag workers in our county. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Henry. I'll look to the board. Supervisor Phillips, your hand is up, but I think that was from the last issue. If you'd like to speak, now's the time, Supervisor Phillips.
No, I'm good. You're right. I couldn't remember how to put my hand down, so.
Thank you. Supervisor Alejo.
Very quickly, just for a comment for Henry, I did want to commend his office because I think compared to the local ag commissioner's offices in the Monterey Bay area, I think his office has been more active, working with associations, really reaching out to farm worker partners like the clinics, the hospitals, a lot of other folks. And that wouldn't have been possible without this office being really proactive in light of this crisis that we're going through. So I just wanted to commend him and all the team, because I know he's not alone in doing all the work, but they've really made some amazing things happen because of their proactiveness. So I just wanted to point to the community that most people don't hear about an ag commissioner's office, but it's so critical in places like Monterey County, and making sure that we're not only ensuring a vibrant industry, but also looking after those workers who are the backbone for the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lopez.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other supervisors with comments? All right, we thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for your presentation, and we're going to move forward and take a presentation from Health Director Elsa Jimenez.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Elsa Jimenez. Thank you for taking some time to hear Health Department's augmentation request. I do want to make a statement as well that the slides included with the posting of the agenda have been slightly modified, specifically slides 5 and 7, and I'll highlight what those changes are as I go through my presentation. This next slide, please. This afternoon, I will provide a very high-level overview, remind us of your investment in early childhood in the current fiscal year, provide you an overview of our recommended budget for the coming fiscal year, and then our pending revised augmentation request for your board's consideration. Next slide. The adopted 2019-2020 budget includes an investment of $340,000 for Bright Beginnings, the county's early childhood development initiative using cannabis funds. I'm pleased to report that this one-time investment is being sustained in collaboration between Bright Beginnings and First Five Monterey County by securing outside funds. I'm only going to highlight a couple of these investments. Multi-year funding from First Five California will support the home visiting hub. The seed funding laid the foundation for this hub, where cross-referral tools between agencies offering home visiting were deployed and developed. The current services landscape has been assessed, where we've identified gaps and are developing priorities for action for the coming year. Bright Beginnings hired a full-time project manager, identified priorities to strengthen the early learning system, and initiated solutions such as technical assistance to maximize state funding and connection to new funding sources in our community. With the pandemic, this position has been instrumental in supporting the COVID emergency response for childcare and well-being. Next slide. Post your April budget workshop, the Health Department was asked to further reduce our general fund allocation base by $600,000, which we were able to do so by reducing the temporary help in clinics at a value of $265,000 and increasing our draw from environmental health restricted fund balances at the tune of $335,000. These reductions were made as requested by the budget office with the understanding that there may be an impact to service levels and clinic services as we resume in-person visits and our longer-term sustainability of enforcement activities and environmental health programs. And before you, in front of you, is our recommended budget, which is almost $311 million, funded by $292 million in revenues, and the use of fund balance, which is 7.1. These are funds that are restricted for health department use. Additionally, we have a general fund contribution, which also includes restricted funds of 4.5 million, which are predominantly in clinic services, environmental health, and animal services. And our cannabis funding remains stable from the year prior. Next slide. Initially, our augmentation request in the amount of $870,000 for departmental operations is not recommended. I have significantly reduced the augmentation request presented at the board budget workshop based on the financial outlook presented earlier today, but I'm still hoping that there could be some support for our operations. In the area of animal services, instead of 2 clerical positions, which initially the request was $164,000, I'm asking for 1082 at a value of $82,000. Animal services processes over 300 complaints per year, and in order to meet our goal of responding and resolving complaints within 24 to 48 hours, we'd need additional support to field the calls and take action as appropriate. This frees up our animal control officers to fully resume duties in the field services operation, conduct field investigations, follow up on kennel and breeder permits, issue and monitor permits for rooster keeping, as well as ensuring dogs are licensed. Based on the community need, I'm also requesting funding in the amount of $122,400 for continuing to offer spay and neuter mobile services to the public. Funding mobile spay and neuter clinics will result in 80 feral cats being altered per month by SNP bus and 10 owned dogs and 20 owned cats being spayed and neutered per month by the Big Fix. Again, the request for implementing 4 to 6 clinics per month is $122,400. For clinic services, as part of our effort to address social determinants of health, we started a partnership with CRLA in 2018, and to date have been able to provide legal support to our clinic patients, helping them recover over $450,000 in lost wages, medical expenses, rents and deposits, and other funds justly due to them. I'm asking for support for $67,500 or 50% of projected costs for January to June of 2020 to assure that these vital services continue beyond the whole person care pilot project, which is slated to end this December. Lastly, our original request for 3 FTEs at a value of $282,000 has been reduced to 1 FTE and OA3 for $86,300. This is the change that I made on the slide. I erroneously had placed an OA2 there on the original slide deck. This OA3 position is vital in supporting our clients in securing and managing benefits they are eligible for, including Medi-Cal, Social Security, Veterans Administration, retirement benefits, SNAP-Ed, and other benefits. We process over 180 new client benefit applications, and the addition of this position will greatly help the office in timely securing benefits due to our clients. So overall, the health department's request for operational programs is $358,000 approximately. Next slide. This year, I bring forward requests for further investment in Bright Beginnings. Implementing the school readiness assessment or kindergarten readiness assessment is universal to our effort to double the proportion of children that are ready for kindergarten, from 25% to 50% by 2025, specifically to decrease the gap in kindergarten readiness between children of low income and children of non-low income families. This assessment should be implemented every 3 years, and the last time that we were able to conduct this was in 2015. In 2016, a team of evaluation specialists, including county staff, with input from families and early educators, reviewed the assessment process and revised it through an equity lens, and the new tools will attempt to correct any biases against dual language learners in the prior tool. This funding requests include adapting the tool to local needs and training teachers to use the tool, which must be completed prior to resuming education in the fall of 2021. And the request for the school readiness assessment is $100,000. Secondly, in 2016, Bright Beginnings launched the Family-Friendly Business Certification Program. Through an online self-reporting system, businesses are awarded either a certificate as a family-friendly business related to its human resources policies and practices, and to date we have over 25 that are certified as such, or as a child well-being business, and to date we have 15 of those. A welcoming business means that they are including experiences that are child-oriented. So for example, they have small tables and chairs or activities for children while their parents are receiving services at those facilities. This program is about supporting thriving families and thriving economies. In an era of new requirements for physical distancing, in particular, a vastly different school schedule that no longer may align with the 9-to-5 jobs, employers will need to find creative ways to accommodate and support their employees. This funding will support newly assessed challenges of employers and designing a family-friendly business program to align the needs of employers and employees while supporting the health of young children. The request for expansion of the family-friendly business is $100,000. And lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic adds a new layer of adverse childhood experiences in the lives of our young children, many of which are already facing high rates of poverty, discrimination, and violence. Bright Beginnings will support a countywide trauma-informed, healing-centered community of learning, engaging multidisciplinary, cross-sector early childhood development practitioners that are aligned with the current county GARE process. By integrating this kind of approach, we intend to prevent and mitigate both short and long-term negative effects of compound adverse childhood experiences, supporting young children and their families so that they can succeed in life and in school. In summary, I am asking $400,000 of cannabis funds for further investment in Bright Beginnings in direct response to the community priorities for use of cannabis funds. Next slide. Our original request for augmentations was $11.1 million. Obviously, this request was prepared well in advance of our current pandemic. I know the fiscal outlook is not bright and therefore has significantly reduced our departmental request for operations from originally over $800,000 to $360,000, which could be even further reduced to $300,000 by reducing the number of mobile spay and neuter clinics offered. There are concerns about sustainability of new positions, And if this is the case, any financial support that you can provide for temporary support at both Animal Services and Public Guardian is greatly appreciated, as it would help us better meet our operational needs. Continuing to invest in Bright Beginnings is vital for improving the well-being of our community and affording all children, particularly those coming from lower income communities where opportunities are not plentiful, an opportunity to achieve their fullest potential. Your one-time investment of $340,000 in the current fiscal year towards Bright Beginnings has been sustained through outside funding sources. Our ask for an additional one-time investment in Bright Beginnings would keep us on a positive trajectory in systems change and coordination for our families and young children, resulting in economic well-being. And the request for Bright Beginnings is $400,000. Thank you for your time today and your thoughtful approach in allocating finite funding resources that you may have available, knowing that the fiscal outlook is uncertain. And with that, I'll take any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Elsa. I see Supervisor Alejo has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on, now, first of all, thank Ms. Jimenez and her team for this proposal. I think it's a reasonable one. These are not high cost numbers when we look at the overall county budget of almost $1.6 billion. And I did want to just stress on some of these points, certainly on the Public Guardian, dealing with our elderly and most vulnerable disabled residents. That's critical, especially now, because these are the most vulnerable populations during these challenging times. Not to mention what CRLA would do. We could expect that in those who are behind on their rent in the next fiscal year, and as the Judicial Council removes its moratorium on processing evictions, even though it's going to last for 90 days after the state order is removed, there's going to be a high volume of residents needing that kind of legal assistance, whether it's advice or filling out paperwork or representation. The $67,000 is a pretty small amount compared to what we expect this coming year is going to be a tremendous need in light of the COVID crisis. On the other point, certainly, I think these are other items on the Bright Beginnings is where I think we as a board, despite challenging times, we're not asking for an amount in the millions of dollars, but $400,000 to tell the community that in light of our tough budget, we're still adding some more for school readiness and making businesses family friendly. And most importantly, the trauma-informed capacity building is something that has been asked for quite some time. And with what we see happening before us, these would be the time to tell the community, yes, even in a tough budget, even when we're having to perhaps freeze positions and every department tightening the belt, there is still a commitment to address the needs and the inequities that exist in our community. So I just wanted to thank the health department for reflecting some of these values, and I think they couldn't come at a better time. And this is one of those things that we could show the community that we are taking this seriously, that we are leading, and that we are trying to address the systemic changes that are needed in our county. We need to have a national dialogue of what needs to happen as a country, but we as a board could address what we know needs to happen within our own backyard. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I had a question and I think you answered it, Elsa. So I was a little confused by the asterisk on that last slide with the summary of the request, the asterisk next to the mobile services, the annual $122,000, then saying that it was scalable to a bigger number. But I think what you said was that possibly you could work with an allocation that's half of the 122, which would then reduce the overall request down to like $300,000.
Yes, Supervisor Parker, I apologize for the confusion. You are correct.
Okay.
So meaning my total request could be scalable from 360 to 297,000 by reducing the mobile clinic request by half. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I do think we've just gotten to the point where we've got some momentum going. So I think that request may be reasonable, but I'm going to sort of wait and see how all of the budget requests kind of play out as we go forward. So thanks for that clarification.
Supervisor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question before I had a few comments. The trauma-informed capacity building, is that, and I'm sorry I missed it, is that a completely new program, Elsa?
Yes, this would be a new strategy that would be led by Bright Beginnings with our practitioners in the early care space.
Okay. Well, just my thought was, and I haven't had a chance to really speak about these things, but we've taken all our, all our commitment to make sure that we keep everybody at the county employed with the benefits and the raises that they're scheduled to get. And at some point in time, that may not be realistic. But I don't see doing these things at the expense of programs that we have really felt were important and continue to feel important. And Bright Beginnings is certainly one of them that I feel at least part of the school readiness assessment, maybe the family friendly business ones I think would be important. As to the animal services, I mean, that's a department that we've been trying to build up for years, been underfunded, underutilized, and I probably hear more from my constituents about that than anything. And you know how much we heard about the mobile clinics, and one of the biggest thing we can do is get there out there with SNP bus and with our own vehicle that we talked about. So I think those are really important, and I tend to agree that the public guardian benefit support project is one that is truly justified in looking at. So those are my brief comments.
Thank you, Supervisor Phillips. I concur with everybody's support of the Bright Beginnings request. I think it's critical at these times when we're going to see additional traumas inflicted upon our young people, that they have the resources they need to be able to respond. And I know the state's using their ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, as part of the way that they're going to inform their funding. And the more that we prepare and position ourselves to best help the children of Monterey County, the better positioned we're going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Mary Adams. Supervisor Adams.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to concur. I feel like these are the most important investments that we can make now. Just looking at the youngers who are going through so much at this point, we don't even have an idea of what the end result of this COVID experience is going to have on youth. So as much as we can do to support for them, I'm behind that completely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With those questions and comments, we're going to move on to Lori Medina's presentation on behalf of the Department of Social Services.
Oh, Chris, I totally forgot one question, and maybe we could talk about it with under Lori Medina's, but it goes. I think it's under the Health Department, which was the whole person care. Also, I thought in the budget, it was mentioned that whole person care that focuses on the most high needs homeless population was set to be zero funded in this budget. Is that still the case, or what will happen with that program? Because I know we have proposed proposals to not fund Dorothy's Place, the safe parking program. There's a request from Noche Buena, the shelter, so they could complete and open. And I know that we could talk about that under social services, but where do we at on whole person care? Because I thought we had received funding from the state to continue that, and that there was money under the affordable housing bond specifically for expanding whole person care programs in counties. So could you give us an update on those points?
Sure. I'd be glad to. So the Whole Person Care Pilot is a 5-year pilot funded through the Department of Healthcare Services, which is due to end December of this year. So it runs on a calendar year. You might recall that the state introduced CalAIM, which was expected to transition January 1st, 2021. And many of the services that are currently included in our Whole Person Care Pilot would be able to transition into Medi-Cal managed care through CalAIM. Now, all of this planning was well on its way for a transition. A plan was supposed to be submitted by July, and then COVID-19 hit our community and our state. And so the state recently issued that CalAIM will be delayed 1 year, so it would not start until January 1st, 2022. But there hasn't been any definitive response from the state with respect to what is going to happen to the Whole Person Care pilots that are funded in California due to expire December. As you can imagine, there is quite a bit of advocacy from the counties that have Whole Person Care pilots and their respective associations to extend the Whole Person Care pilot 1 more year so that there wouldn't be a lapse in services to one of our most vulnerable groups of residents in the state of California. There has, again, there hasn't been resolution on that. There hasn't been confirmation on that. We still are, early in this current calendar year and, remain optimistic that the state will extend the Whole Person Care pilot through next December. Now, having said that, there is no guarantee of that. Therefore, that is why you see social services moving forward requests for funding to be able to continue whole person care, as there hasn't been any state confirmation that they're going to grant a 1-year extension to our current contract.
Okay, great. So we got money to December, and if we do get the extension, then we could perhaps have the funding for the last half of the year, right?
Yes, that is correct. But we won't know that probably until next fiscal year. And your board needs to adopt our budget before then.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Director Medina.
For allowing me the opportunity to speak briefly on social services budget. So as you know, social services, we have a department of about 870.
Microphone, please.
Pardon me.
Yeah,
so we have a department. Okay, we have a department of about 877 staff people, and our budget is $281 million. I will say that about 60% of that budget is state and federal funding. We have about 31% of our budget is through realignment, which is really dependent on sales tax and vehicle license taxes. So I remember Dwayne saying early on about, given this current environment, that's a pretty volatile funding stream, so we're a little bit concerned about that. And about 5% of our budget is county general fund. And that 5% that is county general fund is heavily leveraged for us to be able to draw down other federal and state funding. So, if we were to take away $100,000, that would really be $666,000 out of our budget in terms of entitlement programs. So you can see that we have broken down that proportion of county general fund through between entitlement programs, administration, community programs, and a very small portion for military and veteran affairs. As I mentioned before, we've got the concerns around the economic downturn and the COVID-19 impacts to what our realignment may look like. So we have a potential for that to really be negatively impacted. Next slide, please. Our budget request includes a total of 12 augmentations. And of those 12 augmentations that we're requesting, 75% of that is just to maintain our current level of service. The first piece, which was included in the CAO's recommended budget, was the addition of 1 social worker, which is fully funded through state and federal funding. And then, of course, the IHS provider wage and health benefit increases that would entail. The next piece is around our entitlement program, another entitlement program for CalWorks. And this is really relates to the required match that we have to provide to be able to draw down that entitlement program. So we are asking for that 2.5% match, which would be the $330,000. And then the next piece is it's not a new position, but we are recognizing an increase in our need for adult protective services. And what we would like to do is move an existing position to the adult services program, which would create a need for additional county general fund or additional match to be able to do that. So it's really shifting a resource from one program to the other that is not as advantageously resourced as in other areas of our agency. So the next piece I want to talk to, and this is where the large chunk of our concern really is around our community programs, and so they largely support our homeless services and contracts. As was mentioned before, so I'll talk about the coalition services. So we are asking for the augmentation of $306,000 to be able to fund the coalition for the latter part of the year, the last 6 months of next fiscal year, to be able to see us through the end of the year. For our community contracts, we've asked for about $97,000 to be able to support our Gathering for Women, Community Homeless Solutions, and Community Human Services. Again, these are services that provide case management services. There's some transition services that we really know that we all believe are very critical support in our community that otherwise we wouldn't be able to fund. Again, we've used in the past a lot of realignment to help make up the gap where we didn't have county general fund, but with our realignment being so much at risk, we just didn't feel like we could speak confidently that that was a resource that would be available to fill some of these gaps. And then we've got 2 pieces around the Franciscan workers, and this also is impacted by our whole person care funding or the fact that, we really only have a half year of funding for whole person care. So there are 2 pieces of that. And so on my slides, you'll see this is the first piece where we're asking for basically the match that we need to be able to provide for the whole person care dollars. And so we're asking for the $138,750. You'll see later on in the next slide that I'm asking for a larger amount, $277,500 for the same program, and that is really all county general fund for the last part of the fiscal year. So that's where we don't have any more whole person care dollars unless the program gets extended, and we would need to be able to continue to resource that program. We've asked for $100,000 for the Peninsula Shelter, the Seaside Shelter. Again, this is something that, we were really excited about being able to have a program on the peninsula. We were hopeful that other resources were going to be made available. I think that they are still looking for other resources, and I'll talk in a minute about some other opportunities that might be available for some of these solutions that we were just bringing together today. That's kind of new on the horizon. And then our safe parking programs, and this is case management and the services, the wraparound services around the overnight parking. I mentioned the Franciscan workers. Again, that's the last 6 months of the year. And then the last bullet is around the COVIA Home Match Program, which we didn't really get an opportunity to present this program to you as fully as maybe we would have liked to. Where we left this program, we came to the board just to bring the concept about a matching program where seniors could be placed or matched with homeowners or lessors. That would be a good way for some affordable housing. Unfortunately, where we last left the conversation with the board was really asking Covia to go back and, engage with some other jurisdictions to see if they could get some more support. And then COVID-19 hit, and they just have not been able to gain any traction with getting other support. So we did put this also in our request to support them. I will mention, just as a last piece of this presentation, because I know that the ask seems very big, and I know that this board has been very supportive of not only social services but all of our homeless providers, and we do really appreciate that support. So certainly, we are hoping that the board will continue to support. We've also been talking with our partner, my partner, in the Office of Housing through a conversation that happened at the Budget Committee, and it was asked, could we leverage some of our other funding resources for some of these housing programs. So we did talk to our partners in the housing office, and we do think that we could probably leverage, it's risky because we do have to go back to the state and make the request to revise our budget for that, but we do think that about $400,000 of that ask for the community programs could probably fall within that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to supervisors. I see Supervisor Phillips has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lori, I don't see anything in here for I thought there was going to be an augmentation, maybe I'm wrong, about for the Salinas homeless shelter. Or is that coming from another agency, another pocket?
Yeah, that's actually, so one of the things that we did in our base budget was we included our Salinas shelter and the domestic violence shelters in our base budget. So we were not asking for augmentations. That was part of the funding that we were already getting. And so that Salinas shelter is being funded largely through HEAP funding. And so we feel like that's already covered.
Okay. And I support the seaside shelter, but looking at the parking program, how many people are we averaging at the parking program a night, or do you know?
I don't know how many we have a night. I think that we've had somewhere in the range of 30 some odd participants for the program, but I can't say how much we have currently.
My thing is, if with us looking to open up the seaside, if we could have a semblance of that program kind of going there, where the supervision could be in the parking lot near there. I don't know whether that's feasible, but I was looking at just a way to, combine services with efficiency. So just my thought. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Medina, could you say again what you said at the end? You said something about $400,000 for community programs, but I don't know how that relates to the augmentation request. So could you just kind of spell out that if that works, what it would go for?
Sure. So on page 5 of the slides, yeah, you're right there. Thank you. At the top where you say community programs, you will see $1.1 million. So that's really the total of all of those homeless programs that we have. So in talking with the housing office, Anastasia Wyatt, what we are looking at is reworking basically her HAP budget, the housing assistance program funding that we're getting through the state that's coming through the housing office, and seeing if some of these programs will fit in that criteria. So it's not a net gain for us. It just means that we would be deferring some other things, some other services that we wanted to provide for constituents like rental assistance and other things, but it is a way to cover existing services with a funding stream that we already have.
Interesting. Okay. And then it also looks as though if there were an extension of whole person care, which is not a sure thing, but if that were to happen, then some of these requests would not be necessary. So that also, it's just one of those things where we can see that there's a little, if we're lucky, there's a way to move some of the money around and, you know, not need all of it in the places where we need to put it now because we don't see where the other options are.
Yes, I think that's possible. I think that it's a big if, and the whole person care piece particularly, because now that they're talking about delaying that program until 2022. So, I mean, best case scenario, we would have had a 6-month gap. Now, you know, worst case scenario, it's a little more than a year. I think either way it goes, we would see some gap in funding through whole person care.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, these are really just such important safety net services. It's, you know, it adds up to some money, but these are definitely services that if we're not providing them, we're going to see these folks at Natividad, we're going to see these folks possibly, you know, within our law enforcement system, and that's just not the way we want to treat our residents. So thank you.
Supervisor Alejo.
Thank you. I did want to just point out that I don't see how we would the state would not extend whole person care under Gavin Newsom's leadership and under the Speaker and the current President of the Senate. I just don't see that not taking place. I mean, there's been a lot of support, even though they got a hard budget. I see perhaps being extended at perhaps a reduced amount, but I think there's no way that it would not get extended for the gap in the period of time. But I did, as a chair of the Leave Me Home Leadership Council, our Continuum of Care, I did want to speak up for some of these services because we all know in this crisis, there's going to be more homeless, some are on the brink of being homeless, and to not keep some of these critical programs funded, we're basically undermining our own efforts to take care of our most vulnerable families and individuals. I think it's even more imperative now more than ever to keep that safety net in place in light of this crisis and the infliction of a lot more economic hardship that is just up ahead. It's already hard for a lot of families, you know, and as I said, I had one family that's waiting 2 months to get their unemployment check, and they're really, really desperate situation. So I do want to just speak up for Dorothy's Place and the other providers that are doing God's work. They are truly helping the most needy in our community. The whole person care focuses on our more intensive homeless residents that if we don't fund them through this program, we're going to pay when they have to and they end up in jail, when they end up in our hospitals. It's smart and it's logical and it's medically and scientific that we'd rather give these wraparound services to them instead of waiting until they end up in a more dire situation that is much more expensive and that we will have to pay for anyways. On the parking lot program, I'm like a supervisor, I want to see what the numbers are, but I do want to put in perspective that even with Noche Buena, that I also support, and I want to advocate for them getting that gap in funding because they want to open soon. I think their goal is to open by November, and we've come a long way in the continuum of care to get a lot of other mayors and local governments to want to be part of the solution. And we just had conversations here a year and a half ago, where we were trying to get peninsula cities and communities to want to support us. Now we got them on board. Now we're partners with Mayor Oglesby and Seaside, and I think a lot of other elected officials on the peninsula who want to see We want to be part of the solution. And if we could step up and partner to close that $100,000 gap, I think we should be supportive of that and trying to find the funds to make that happen. But that shelter, as I want to remind folks, is focused on families, so only entire families, or women and children. Individuals who are now living in their car, men who are living in their cars that are utilizing the safe parking program won't be able to benefit from the seaside shelter. So I just want to put that into perspective, that we should take a close look at that, look at the numbers, the cost, but if it's serving a lot of individuals who will not be able to benefit from the new seaside shelter, which again doesn't open to November at the earliest, I think we should look to keep that safety net in place in the short run until we could further evaluate. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. I'm going to ask
Chair Lopez.
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you very much. So I just want to agree with my colleagues, particularly about the funding that we have to have for the homeless programs that we've got. I am so thankful that Supervisor Alejo was applauding the use of the funds for Gathering for Women. We do desperately need a place for homeless people on the Monterey Peninsula, and this is the perfect program for it. It sounds like just about everybody agrees. But to me, it seems like the failure to recommend funding for most of these augmentations submitted by the Department of Social Services is just unacceptable, because the programs and the service providers that receive the funding are the underpinning of the community infrastructure that we need to ensure that we're going to be able to move forward and respond to the pandemic, and to be able to respond if there's a resurgence of each of the augmentations listed would be a part of the programs that we would need. I think that we really have a responsibility here, and I know that we're going to discuss everything together. But I do have a question for Ms. Medina, and that is, how can we afford not to contribute the county's share of the CalWORKS cost that's necessary to meet the required match for the aid payments? I was unclear about that when I read through the budget book.
Well, we really can't. What I will say is that what's happened the last several years is that the county has not contributed in terms of county funding the whole share, and we've made it up through realignment. What I'm saying is that I am very concerned about the viability about realignment, because we're getting now to a point where, until we see what that revenue is going to be looking like, we might be spending dollars over again.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
I'm going to go to Supervisor Alejo. I see your hand is up again.
Just one missing piece, but I did bring this up in the budget committee, and Ms. Medina mentioned it, which was the HAP funding. That I was kind of taken aback when I saw the proposals on the table for these homeless services in light of the HAP funding, because the first round of state funding was called HEAP, H-E-A-P. The second round of state funding, which was the first 2 rounds we ever got to address homelessness in California, is HAP, H-H-A-P. So the second round of funding was distributed differently than the first year. The second round still gave a portion to the continuum of care, but about $3 to $4 million was given directly to the county, unlike the previous year. So I was wondering, why are we making these cuts when we just got an infusion of millions of additional dollars to help us preserve and expand homelessness services in Monterey County? And I was hoping that Anastasia might be able to help us with that, answer that question, because it seems like we should have these additional resources to keep these safety net programs in place with these added state dollars.
Thank you. And Anastasia is making her way up.
Supervisor Alejo, we are looking at HAP to work into this budget, and utilizing HAP, it has to meet certain criteria like housing first principles, that it matches some of the programs that are required under the HAP budget. We did submit the HAP budget. We did come to the board many months ago, it feels like forever ago, on the HAP budget. And so we did submit that to the state. So I've been working with the Department of Social Services and on how we could utilize some of the funding for programs that are eligible for HAP to be utilized. So there is an opportunity, as Lori said, about 400,000, I think, is what we were looking at that we could fund with the HAP budget. But also with the HAP budget, one of the big things right now that is a huge need is rental assistance. So pre-COVID, we wanted to look at a new program for rental assistance, doing something really innovative and different. And especially right now, it's very needed. We want to house people from Project Room Key into permanent housing. So we are also working with the coalition to come up with a really robust program. We worked with just a lot of different, I've been talking to a lot of community groups about how can we get this program off the ground and running so that we're doing something different, because there's a capacity issue here as well. So it's one thing to have the funding, but it's another thing to have the people to run a program and make it work. And actually, when somebody says, I need that rental check, we can say, okay, here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to go from A to B. So that was a big chunk in our budget, and I'm glad we have it in there. So I will have to rework the HAP budget a little bit. But we also discussed with workforce development, and I know that Chris Donnelly mentioned this earlier today, that workforce development had 21 people. We are taking 11 of those people towards this rental program so that we are able to house people permanently and do some very innovative things like having housing navigators. And so that's a big chunk of that budget. So we don't want to cut too far into the budget, but we did feel like a little over 400,000 we can manage toward programs, because we don't want to see them cut. Like if Dorothy's Place were to shut down in Chinatown right now, it'd be devastating as the population keeps increasing, and homeless population is increasing there right now. They're having a lot of problems. This is not the time for us to lose that need.
Thank you, Anastasia, and look forward to maybe coming back to that tomorrow when we kind of provide that direction. But I appreciate that you thinking creatively of how we could use those dollars to help offset some of these asks that are on the table. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the call. If you guys could go back and work on your numbers and bring something tomorrow for our conversation so that we have a clear picture of what this fiscal year might entail from the budget. Seeing no additional supervisors' hands up, we will go ahead and close this presentation. And I do see that there's one more. It looked like a CAO's office general, how do we title this? CAO non-departmental, page 190 by Dwayne Woods and Ezekiel Vega.
Chair, generally what we would do is go to that one after all deliberations and directions are given. That's contingencies, and many times, depending on what sources we have during the deliberations, those contingencies will be a funding source for anything that the board may choose to direct to add back into the budget.
In light of that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and recess us to tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We will meet here to finish this up. I do see I have public hands up, but I will share with the public we did finish our public comment today, so thank you so much for your interest, but that portion of the agenda has now lapsed. We're going to go ahead and recess to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning here in Chambers or via Zoom, and we will try to get back to conflicting lawyers. Okay.
Get it right, you guys.
Okay, so dueling lawyers tell me I need a motion to adjourn to tomorrow at 9 a.m.
I'll do such a motion to recess.
No, a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I'll do a
To
motion.
tomorrow for the dueling attorneys.
So moved.
Second.
And a second from Phillips. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Alejo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
What's all that finger pointing going on? Aye.
Supervisor Parker?
Aye.
And Supervisor Adams?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Lopez?
Aye. We will see you tomorrow morning here in Chambers at 9 a.m.
Adios.
Tomorrow at 9 a.m. And we will, and we'll send